Okay, this is the committee of the whole meeting of the council of the village of Salmo to be held in council chambers at 423 Davies Avenue, Salmo, BC, on Tuesday, March 24th, 2026 at 7 p.m. The meeting has been called to order. That the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting of Tuesday, March 24th, 2026 be adopted as presented.
I'll move.
I'll second. Any more additions? All in favor?
In favor.
Any opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes, there's none, there's no delegations, so we're moving on to bylaws and policy development review. So,
Okay, sure. We the village went through public engagement or part of the public engagement process last week. We were all there at the youth center. We gained some feedback regarding a lot of the feedback was tied to the a lot of home-based businesses and just property use in general, and then some discussion over secondary houses and carriage houses as far as where they would go, and some nuances from those hearings and conversations with council and emails that we've received from property owners have led to these couple changes. Staff suggested changes. Some of them are grammatical, some are changing and adding definitions. So the first change, I guess, would be a lot of the discussion on last Monday was tied to the mixed use designation as far as allowing more, I guess, extensive property uses that may be allowed in other residential zoning. Because the OCP were not, those two zonings or those two land designations don't explicitly limit or expand what is allowed at the property at this point. That's definitely further down into the zoning conversation. So the idea is just to change the name of the mixed use neighborhood to a different either general neighborhood or residential neighborhood, just to kind of quantify a difference between say on the map would be the I guess neighborhood residential versus the mixed use residential now. And it's just to have those remaining separate as land use designations, and just giving it a different definition that may be a little more in line with what is happening there. But this could be something as simple as matching the same definition as a residential neighborhood, or even keeping the same definition that is in mixed use neighborhood right now. Ultimately, those definitions are quite vague in nature, and they don't, like they said, explicitly allow or limit too much versus the other definition. And it was just more of a kind of an optics thing. It's not that it's necessarily changing anything from the mechanics of the OCP. It's just changing a bit of the titles just to reflect there is a difference between a mixed use commercial and mixed use residential. The second, outside of, there's just a couple of grammatical errors as well for the updates. The third option, the third one is just to add coach houses or carriage houses into the definitions. This can also include other different types of secondary houses, like if we wanted to put in tiny homes or anything. We can also have an all-encompassing kind of definition that would say, or anything similar in design. So then if it's really, then it would allow council in the neighborhoods to, in the zoning bylaw underneath of it, to change the minimum width that we have. Outside of that, this really does limit what, if somebody wanted to put in a coach house or anything, it's just really more expanding that. And so I suggested adding coach houses we can add the other property or other designations as well. If there's some other buzzword like tiny home that council felt is appropriate adding in, we can do that as well.
Maybe stop at each one instead of going through all of them if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Just because it would be a lot of information, I think, and instead of us trying to remember what you said,
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
if that's okay.
No, for sure.
So on the first part, the first one, obviously the ground floor, I don't think that anybody has anything because that's going to be, but on the second one, the land designation, does anybody have any questions on it or comments? Councilor Heaton.
Through the chair. Yeah, to me, the general neighborhood just doesn't really jive. I'd be more than happy to keep it mixed use neighborhood or the residential neighborhood. Something like this, the general neighborhood. That being said, is council still wanting to have two separate styles of residential neighborhood? Or is the idea to have one encompassing residential? That would be my question to council, if that's kind of the idea.
Go ahead.
I'm just not sure. Can you elaborate?
Well, on that map, and I know this map isn't in working right now, but there's two different colors. So one is the neighborhood residential, which is orange, and the yellow is the mixed use. So is council wanting to have the two different designations with two different, I guess, for lack of a better term, two different variations of the same residence? So one has commercial, one doesn't. Is that the plan? Kind of be where I'm going, or do we want just one residential encompassing all of Salmo residents? Would be my question.
I guess if you're for the process itself, when it comes to the conversations that were brought up in the public hearing, as far as the intensity of businesses or any kind of density questions, those can be dealt with in the zoning conversation. So this would be if really, I would say it's less important on the commercial home-based business side, but more on the subdivision potential side as far as density, and that just because those properties in yellow are just larger in size generally. They would be only that's changed, but again, in the same token is that in our zoning bylaw and even in our subdivision application bylaws, we can limit certain things by area that aren't tied to zoning colors. So if we wanted, say, really to further in this conversation, if we're talking about our business classes, we could have, say, class 7, where we were talking in the residential side of it as far as the next point of expanding the downtown here for the proposed changes for those areas. You could have limited to have, say, class 7 businesses where nowhere else could. So you can really do it by honestly street address for any of those limitations. It would be more that if there was a real philosophical break between orange and yellow that council would want to recognize. And that would be more, even if you're looking at, say for the ones on Woodland Drive, there's more a potential tourist aspect than what would be allowed downtown. It would be more just kind of opening it up to the larger parcels and having more potential there for residential, even the business use and tourism would be the two reasons, but not really necessary. But a lot of towns and communities have these separations. Just if they want certain nuances to be different, they can. It makes it easier further down, but it's a little more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is where I think I'm almost repeating myself. Sorry.
We're going to number 3.
So yeah, so the number 3 is just adding coach houses, tiny homes, or anything else to that definition for the residential neighborhood. if there was something that, was just a little more, I guess, inclusive, if council wanted to put any other, definitions in there, I added, like I said, I added coach houses because that was a term that was used, in previous discussions. But it's not like, say, for example, the one, because of the tiny homes, it's specifically because of their different construction and their style and their look. That would be something that maybe I would ask council if they would consider adding that in there, because a coach house versus a secondary suite is, somewhat depending on who you ask, interchangeable. Or for me, I see a coach house as a second building. But if council feels that coach houses would encompass any of those differences, tiny houses, the garage packages, the manufactured homes, the modulars, any of those, that can be added to this definition. And then in the definition for the coach houses, we could include so yeah, we would that. So then that would be something that we would add to that as well. Would be creating that definition, if that's what council wanted to encompass all of that under coach house, or if they wanted to include that under a different definition, like a secondary housing, or something that way. Like, again, it's more where council feels comfortable putting, more so than anything. I mean, we can always create definitions or put something like this completely separate. And if we do break it out, it does help in the zoning conversations because it's clarified in the OCP. But this is kind of where this isn't really kind of finalized. This is more kind of up for discussion where council would like this to go.
Yeah, so beyond a coach host definition, I think we need that. And as I've said before, and I don't know if it's so much valid here or in the zoning, but we need, before we can decide on tiny homes and modulars and trailers, we need actual definitions of what they are. Because it's very hard to say, yeah, let's have that, but without a definition, I think we have to lay it out for us to start, and then for the public, we have to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I guess just to follow up on that, I know that there's, like, say, for example, like manufactured homes and say, what's the other one that is, say, a tiny house, depending on, they all have CSA numbers. So we can register and allow certain things based on CSA numbers. So it would just be, the further question is if there's anything that doesn't have a definition, what that would include. Like, so say if somebody is stick building something, what the limitation would be. Because if somebody's moving on a modular or a tiny home, that's going to be built in the factory, have a stamp and everything else. But if somebody wanted to stick build a tiny home, but not move on a tiny home, is that something, like, if we didn't allow tiny homes, we have to have the same language in there to keep that stick built construction from happening as well, or include it if we're wanting both. So we can definitely add definitions for the ones that have specific model numbers through building code. Anything else is going to be more of a nuanced conversation as far as what we want where. So a lot of it I can absolutely provide, but there's still going to be some where there's going to be a bit of gray that we'll need to go through. But ultimately, yeah, the building code usually is a big determinant of that, because we have people that have tried bringing in tiny homes and modulars that haven't been Salmo approved based on our snow load. Like, they were built on the island and they can't move here because it's just two different codes. So it's just, yeah, to your point, those will definitely be included in those definitions so that the residents and even the approving officers can have a quick understanding of what has to really get looked at and what is kind of a rubber stamp for application to process inspectors.
I've been looking at tiny homes, and there's such a diverse, you know, and yeah, we've said they're on wheels, but they don't necessarily have to be on wheels. It's just a small house. So that's why I mean we need like actually definitions of what we're.
Yeah, if I may,
Yes.
through the chair, like, we've been looking into building a tiny home ourselves. And so we kind of seen all the different ones, and there's ones that are like, you know, like a trailer home you would pull in and hook up just like a home. But it's becoming more and more common because people don't, it's not economical to build a whole house, that they're building actually these little tiny homes that, you know, they build them in a shop. And it's kind of modulated, but it's a, you know, a tiny home that they actually look pretty nice, and they're more affordable than a house per se. So it's just something to think about as we move forward with these conversations. We could even just say, hey, like, we don't want just any old tiny home coming in. We figure out what kinds are being manufactured. Like to your point, like, are they even designed to be here? Are they pulling it from Vancouver and it's not gonna hold up? So it might be worth figuring out if there's certain code that we can say, if it's to this code in our area, it can hold up to the snow and aesthetically it looks good. Just some thoughts.
The ones that you've been looking at, and don't have wheels on them, are they hooked up to water and sewer?
Yeah. Like basically you would drop it in place, hook up your water, sewer.
So it would be upstairs.
But it would be on, like, you could put it on foundation if you wanted to, small foundation, or you could put it on just piles. And then if you needed to move and you wanted to take your tiny home with you, you just unhook everything, pull it on the truck.
It's an interesting conversation because a lot of communities throughout BC have had homes moved, actual houses, and lots of them in Salmo from mines. So, and they're from anywhere from 8 to 1,000 square feet. And so I think that the idea of what people, and I agree, is that we do need a definition, because what I might think of what a tiny home is to what anybody else might think of, everybody can have their own definition, and we can call them all that we want. It's, do we want them that they're on foundation? Doesn't matter what the size is, that we want them on foundation. We've heard that through our OCP survey and through the public hearing that we don't want more modular single wide homes. We don't want trailer parks. Well, so does that mean that we want individual ones all over the place? Or do we want them, you know, anything's movable? Here's my point. I have a friend that moved one all the way to Vancouver Island, a great big house. So everything's movable. I think that the name is what we're stuck on. And maybe that what the conversation is what size is it? Like you say, everything has to be CSA anyways. Klesnikoff builds little things. They're not calling them tiny homes. And they're portable, and they'll bring them and they'll set them right in your area. So my concern is that we fixate on a whole bunch of names for definition. Is that, what do we want? Do we want something that has to be on foundation, or can it be on wheels and move? I think that's kind of where there needs to be a little bit of a clarification.
Thanks through the chair. In my brain, the way I'm thinking about the whole tiny home scenario is, I think it's something we should definitely consider. But where I not really draw my line, where I think it should go, is not being movable, so without wheels. Because why can't my 19-foot travel trailer, why can't I use that as a tiny home? It's not motorized, can't drive away, but it's on wheels and I can park it wherever I want. I can hook up the sewer and water with it. So why can't I use that as opposed to manufactured modular tiny home? So for me, I think that would alleviate a lot of questioning if it was on a foundation or piles. And then it would just be a sizing question. How big does council want, or how small should they go and how big can they go? I think that would make it a little easier. Because yeah, if we allow them to be on trailer wheels, we're gonna have lots of people who get out of trailers and, you know, it's my tiny home, I'm gonna get up sewer on water. And there's nothing you can really say about that. So that's kind of what the thought process would be on tiny home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is something that even in the zoning, we can specify what structure is allowed where based even on parcel size. So that a tiny home, we wouldn't say want on anything bigger than 75.75 an acre, for example, because we feel that there'd be more room, like going the other way. But then say we wouldn't want something that would be like basically maximizing the parcel coverage in on a 30-footer or like there has to be some balance as far as neighborhood aesthetic and just what would work. So that can come later, but absolutely is that if it's just setting a general standard that we don't want them movable and that applies to all of them, then we can now differentiate, okay, well, everything needs to be on foundation or piles. Now this can go here, this can go there, depending on what council chose. So there's definitely options there as far as making something permanent. The thing would be is that now what standard would council want? Because, you know, say for example, for building code for manufactured homes, wood piles on concrete pilings match. In my just last place of work, they did not want that. They wanted steel or concrete pilings. So then that was just, it was supersedes code. It is a bit beefier. But that we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to exceed building code if we'd like. But it would just be dependent on the line that council would want if they felt, you know, we don't have lots of ground heaving and shifting here too much. So it's not really that much of a concern where back in Alberta, that was why they wanted the steel and the concrete was because of the heating. Because it was southern Alberta, they had massive temperature shifts. Here we don't have that as much, so that might not be a consideration that we need for those. So that would just be more of a physical representation of what council would want. But we can definitely look at what type of permanent going forward this year.
Is everybody in agreement to that we can move on from that, or?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think as we move forward. Here. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, number 4, just kind of almost redundant about just creating that separate definition for a general neighborhood or general residential. That would have just changed up the mixed use label is all. This one is very similar to the other definition. It's pretty much exact. So it would just be kind of encompassing all of it. It would all depend on what council wants. If they want to keep them as separate designations and have 2 separate definitions, or they can have 2 designations with very similar definitions, knowing that most of the changes will come in the subsequent bylaws. So usually you would want to keep them separate just for optics, so that if there is potential, like we were saying with, or like I was saying with the ones on the land drive for more tourist opportunities or what have you, having that separate definition helps with those things. But again, because the OCP isn't necessarily binding, and those definitions that are currently in there are quite open. It's really, there's not really much risk or one way or the other as far as changing things. So it would be more of how council wanted to handle that is all.
This is just a question for me on this. So like from the public hearing, I was hearing that people weren't comfortable with that mixed use label because of some of the things that are going on down in those neighborhoods. Would it make sense? And I know we probably already talked about this, so forgive me, but if we made those designations the same, when we get to the bylaw piece, are we able to kind of decide, okay, these are the allowances for anywhere, but we're kind of making those decisions. So if somebody comes and they're applying for a business and they apply and say they want to put a welding shop right in downtown Salmo, we obviously would go, hey, no, we can't. You're going to have to find a more suitable location for that business. Does that make sense to? No.
Try again, just try and alter what you were saying.
Yeah, I'm basically saying, like, if we, instead of having the two, we just had one.
Where's the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's residential, but when it gets to the point where they're gonna apply, like, we still allow for them to apply for business, but we're gonna decide
zoning.
in the zoning what type of things they can apply for in that thing. I'm just trying to understand.
Basically what it is, isn't it?
No, because if you look at the different colors, will determine what neighborhood it is.
Well, no, but what happens in those neighborhoods will be
In the zone.
determined in the zone.
Yes. Oh,
Yes, so it doesn't matter if they're the same color or two different colors. It'll be up to us in the zoning to determine what is allowed to happen, right?
Yeah, ultimately, it would be like right now at this point, is that if council would look at just the community as a whole and say those two areas should be treated differently for any reason that you have up here. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's zoning, density, if it is home-based businesses, you can have those separate. But to Councillor McKellar's point is that no, and when it comes to when we're going to be drilling down into the business license bylaw and the zoning bylaw as far as determining those classes that I put in the report and determining the scoring for each of that will really figure out where things are going, because what we're going to do is through that study is determine the levels for each property. So we can have, say, for example, 2 welding businesses and have different, there'll be different classes depending on their activity. And all of that will be determined through their application process. Like the application is going to be a little more extensive or a lot more extensive than what their business owners are used to. But it is the idea of clarifying what is allowed there, where, and funneling people where council would want them to go. So for the OCP itself, it's not really affected. It would, that scoring would come later. So those conversations are going to be a lot more nuanced as far as what we determine the levels of traffic and light pollution and all of that. But for the OCP, having these 2 designations doesn't change that discussion at all.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We good with that? Yeah, moving on. Yes. No.
Okay, number 5 is just the village progressing through. We had created basically 3 lots, or we're in the process. They're just being finalized. By the time we do first reading, the lawyers or the land titles should be done with it. The lawyers have already approved it and sent it off, so we're literally waiting on land titles. So the 3 lots are the 2 of them are the old 3rd Street road allowance. One is on Hutchison, one is on the 4th.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
We have
Good job, fun.
a speech.
Oh. I'm sorry. My apologies. Yeah, okay. So the definition of adding mixed use development, this is more just trying to encompass buildings that have multiple uses, like particularly downtown, where we would have residents above and business below. It's just kind of clarifying that definition. It's just right now, it's just kind of opening it up and kind of clarifying things from where it was before. It's really just a paper sheet, but if there's any questions about that.
Any questions?
The next one, number 6, is just a land designation change. We reached out to a few property owners that were that have reached out to us in the past looking for development opportunities, and this was the opportunity through council in this process to, help these, landowners, change their designations to something a little more, conducive to development and a little more to tying into neighbor aesthetics. So, is that one right there, the last red one? Yeah. And so in the other OCP, it was designated 50% commercial,
I'm lost.
so that right is, yeah, right beside the orange there, yeah. Perfect. That in the previous was, split because there's two, if you squint, you can kind of see there's a property line going through an angle halfway through the property. Just to actually find some color on the left, it'll be easy to see. There's that little line going through. So what we had in the previous designation is one of those was residential, one of those was commercial. And so the property owner, wants to switch that to, residential is basically what it is that they're just looking at expanding some residential, and it was just harder. He would have to apply for a designation change to build anything extra residential just because of the designation. So it's just going through and even with like it's very similar to the property next door with the orange. They were originally just resource recovery, and we're just changing them to something.
That's the one I was thinking.
Yeah.
It was that one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I thought was the start.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and this one, it was just kind of odd because in the old zoning and the OCP it had it was both. And it used to be 5 or 6 parcels on that block, and then it was consolidated a while ago, like say a decade or so ago. There was the bottom part where the houses were, there was 6 or 7 lots that were just there from previous years. So this is just kind of going into just changing it to residential to help the person develop a little more density.
So this takes care of both pieces then?
Yes.
Both of these? Did anybody have any questions on that?
Well, that's why they didn't change numbers. There was 2 5s and 6. That's why.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I said block.
We were just going to page number at the bottom.
So my apology, that didn't autocorrect. So yeah, where it says number 5, land use map change number 3, that should say number 6 and 7. This one is speaking to the 3 lots that we created, 2 on the 3rd Street road allowance and the expansion of the lot on First Street. That one is right beside Highway 6 and right across on First Street. It's just a triangle parcel right at the edge of town. And what we had done, started back in, I believe, 2021, was we started consolidating that road. So we were just finalizing that with the 2. So ultimately, it's just recognizing those changes. The one on First Street does not have to be manipulated as far as any kind of zoning or any designation. The other 2, they just need to be created to have a designation. So what I would be suggesting is that we create them for the residential neighborhood to match everything around that. And that will just allow for a lot of, well, whatever we need for residential development. So that was just accounting for those 2 changes. And then number 6 was just more time to, and this is where it was a bit of a fork in the road for an operational consideration, is that our building height is 30 feet for our primary dwelling, and having them as 2 stories in the idea of development and allowing somebody to construct a building like that, it wouldn't be very aesthetically pleasing. As far as having basically the opportunity to have 2 15-foot floors, you would try and increase, like talking with our fire chief, I've reached out to him again during this process to see if there was any hesitations with allowing 3-story construction. He does not have any concerns, generally speaking. So, but that would be the fork in the road, is the council can ultimately, choose to potentially lower building height so that it would fit in a more conventional two-story, so that we would only allow 2 stories as a maximum as a rule. And then the building heights would be reflective of that. Or if we're looking at keeping the same building height, allowing that, or, 3rd story in the OCP. It doesn't mean that we have to force that. It's just the one little gap that we have in our documents is all. So.
If I may, through the chair, I was under the impression from the fire chief, his concern was that we didn't have a ladder truck to properly deal with any structure fires. And that was the reason why we weren't doing the 3rd story.
Yeah, the understanding is that the truck can go that, but that like it would be the same response as a high rise, is that they just have to get into the building. Like the truck can only go is only so capable, but from my conversations with them, 3 stories is fine. So again, if there was something specific to the response, he mentioned that the trucks can only go so high, but then the normal response would be for like anywhere else, is like Nelson or Trail up to 5-story buildings. It's like you're running up the stairs for the rest of it. And that's something that, again, he is not hesitant of us approving, but I'm sure that if you're asking them honestly, having a 2-story is probably, better for the truck and for the department, generally speaking. But as far as them saying, no, we can't do that, it's good.
So I just want to clarify, I think that, because that is what it was, but I think what it was is that we were talking about hiring the height.
Oh, raising our.
Raising our height,
Okay.
and this is staying at 30
Yeah.
feet,
Mhm.
right? So you can build 3 stories in that 30 feet, so it doesn't affect the fire truck.
Okay, yeah, yes, okay, that would make sense.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's just like basically it's just adding another set of steps for them to go up. As there's really, the building height wouldn't change. The only quick consideration, I guess, when it comes to any sort of building height that we would have is, and this isn't tied to number 6, but this is just a general council consideration for the OCP. When we're talking about carriage houses and secondary houses versus the opportunity for outbuildings to be taller to park RVs. So if there was a difference in those 2 building heights that we would want to address or not. So say, for example, you'd have a carriage house with a garage package underneath. Well, you're probably looking at 25 feet for that, where you're getting really close to our height. But then the same question, because it's now right now it's classified in our zoning bylaw that it would have to meet the secondary building height. Like it's not, there's a bit of a gap where our bylaws would somewhat, and again, this will get changed very quickly once we go through the new one, but essentially we have to distinguish if there's a difference between carriage houses and accessory dwellings for the building height. So if there is a difference or not, like if council wants to keep that, I believe it's considerably smaller is I guess what, so anything is allowed is what I believe 17 or 18 feet. I'll have to look at that. It's but then the carriage house would allow for up to 30 based on it being a residence. And it's more about the aesthetics, the neighborhood aesthetics that you'd have. You could have outbuildings that are buried in the back as far as height, and I don't know where council's opinion is on that, but just something to consider if there is any difference, because it's easy just to say any second residence or accessory building cannot exceed the height of the primary residence, for example. Or has to be a certain cap below it. Just in the idea that you'd have, say, for example, a bungalow, and then you could have as an accessory dwelling a 3-story. I don't know if we would necessarily want that. I'm not saying that we don't want that, but I mean, it would throw the neighborhood aesthetics into a bit of a disarray. So it's just making sure that we're consistent on that side of it. But again, that will all come down to the zoning conversation, but this is more just if in the OCP we wanted to make a difference, because there is some reference to building heights here. So, if there was just any considerations in that conversation, that we just addressed them. Sorry for that tangent, that was a bit off topic, but it was just something we.
No, but maybe we should look at where it says that in the actual OCP, so we can, since we've already got the information. Looks like it's on 152. It was not 65, so. General. Oh, at the bottom, 182. 182? 182. And patented. Lucky. A lot of papers.
So yeah, and this is in this instance, this is specifically talking about the DPA of the downtown revitalization. But literally it is the same conversation. So this is actually a great place to reference it, Mayor. It's
I was just going off of what you had here.
yeah, no, absolutely. So that's that is something that right now is the place that describes it. It talks about any sort of building height. It's just more now if this is something that we would want to reconsider.
So we have it in here, maximum of 3 building heights.
Yeah, so that was the one. Yeah, that's yeah. But yeah, I guess so. It's just making sure that I guess that if there is any difference between that DPA and the rest of the community, that we just designate that, or just say that out loud, that the DPA for downtown, we might want 3-story buildings and have a different building height than say our carriage houses or any kind of different development, because this doesn't differentiate between commercial and residential. It just is.
Can you tell us what we have? Is it the same throughout Salmo right now for building heights?
Yes.
Okay. So then the question would be to council, if you guys want to have different throughout the community, or if you want to keep it the same that it's been. So, yes.
I wouldn't mind seeing it go 3-story downtown. It would give opportunity to have a business underneath and then 2 residents on top. I would think in residential, probably not yet. I don't think we have the density to. I would say downtown would be. I think it would be appropriate.
And give you a scenario so you can maybe, is if somebody wanted to build 3 apartments in their backyard because they have a big piece of property, and they want to build it 30 feet high, and their house is only 26 feet high, how would that work as going through a building?
Now or what we're planning? Like now?
Well, right now.
Right now, there's, okay,
Pretend that they're allowed to build
honestly,
up to 30 feet.
nothing would stop. That would happen right now, as long as they met the rest of the setbacks. Yeah, because we don't differentiate right now between the height of. I'll have to double check that. I'll have to, because I might have just misspoke about the difference. I think that any secondary, the primary residence can be a certain height, and then any building after that has to be a certain height. I'll look into that, how that's worded. If it's tied to a resident or if it's tied to this, if we automatically filter it from primary residence to accessory building, and we don't have that path for secondary, then it would stay with the accessory building height. If there is a path that it says residential buildings can be up to 30 feet, then that could in theory happen with little resistance. I will have to double check that.
That might be something when we have this conversation again. Of that is because, as Councillor Heatley had said, is differentiating the downtown to the rest of the community. Because we do have some big parcels in Salmo, and they may want to, there's some very large parcels that could put much more than 3.
Well, and then that's the kind of the scenario when we're combining the low and the medium, is that opens that up pretty fast as far as that, like once the zoning bylaw discussion happens, and that is, say for example, we keep the density the same as far as what the 12 and the 24, that might be this.
I think that's.
As far as the density per hectare, if that stays the same, then ultimately it is, now parcel size they can fit in. So to the point of our, say, newly created lots that we were looking at is, we'll use the one on, the 2 on 3rd Street, because they're just, right beside each other, is that one of them technically can fit 5 as a maximum under the current density, and the bottom one can fit 6. So if we kept that, once we approve this and approve that in the zoning, is that now it's basically on parcel size, how much you can fit in. So some places may only allow the 1 or 2 based on the legislation, but the bigger parcels could add a lot more. The trick is how, we were talking about this with staff and public works, is the service tie-in. And so say for the parcels that are larger that wanted to do that, is if they wanted to stratify it or turn it into a condominium, then those services need to be separate from the primary dwelling. So if we wanted to limit that, then we would require that the servicing come from the primary dwelling. So then now they can't subdivide it, and now that is one parcel. Or we do it the other way, where we force them to have their own servicing, which would now create the opportunity, if the density would allow and our minimum parcel size allow, to subdivide. So anything that was down south and would have room for a couple panhandles, that would happen a lot faster than what it would happen now, just based on the density requirements once those are split out. But the thing for us right now is that our minimum parcel size is 5,000 square feet. So in a lot of those bigger parcels, you can fit lots of those in there. And ultimately, in the legislation, you can technically put 2 units in there, like a single 2-family. So you can increase your density very quickly with those parcels. It's just now, once, I would say the developers decide what they're doing, it's really up to us as a village to determine how we want to funnel that, because as we know, people will develop whatever our rules are allowed, like their creativity will outpace us. So particularly with some of this increased dwelling, if we're worried about, service load and infrastructure load, then we're going to have to limit those conversations to certain places in town. And, this is where our water study is going to come in, that we're doing, in our sewer infrastructure study that we're doing, is going to now allow us to dictate that a lot cleaner. But again, the good news is that we don't need those plans for anything in our OCP or zoning conversations. It's just more when it comes to the approval and the application process as far as consideration. But it would be really more about what we would want at the end of the day. It's like, once it's built, would we want somebody to stratify it or not? And if so, then it's then we should be preemptively planning where the road should go, where the utilities should go, all of that. If that was something we were encouraging. So.
Yes.
Question. Should we be making like a determination on these as we go? Or?
That's one of the things that can already feel.
Oh, okay. Just
There's
because
a check.
Yeah.
Got a long way to go.
So we're already, so what I'm hearing council say, and anybody correct me if I'm not saying this correctly, is that we're good with the 3-story because we're still staying in our 30 feet. We haven't changed that. So what we're saying is that we're good with, if somebody wants to build 3 stories opposed to 2 stories as what they're right now.
Makes more sense.
So we're good with that one?
And just to confirm, Thank you, Mayor. This is for the entirety of the village. This isn't just for the DPA.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah.
Okay.
To clarify on that, and that would be for all like secondary dwellings as well, or would that would be clarified down?
That conversation, well, I guess,
That would
Either
be
way.
a conversation.
yeah, we can,
Yeah.
we can designate it in the OCP as having just a maximum building height, period.
Mhm.
And then in the zoning, determine if we want accessory or residence.
Thank you.
And yeah, that was my general, I guess, summary of my changes. I guess that I had noticed just through our conversation and a little bit more of somewhat of a paper work side of things. The next part of it is the public suggested changes, whether it was from my conversations with council or the some of the residents. We heard back some consistent themes. So the first one is, again, a lot of the feedback we received in the public hearing was, will be meant for the further discussions as far as zoning and the business license bylaw, et cetera. So this isn't a summary of the entire feedback received. It's just the kind of points that we had gotten from this, and even conversations that, again, I've had with residents that guide into council conversations as well. So the first one is the land designation change. Just some discussion about increasing the downtown core size and allowing for more development in those locations. So just looking at the map, you can see that there's a part of downtown that is that is deemed residential, and it's basically where yeah, sure, absolutely. So where this would be is just this part right here, and so then right here is Squirrels. Here's the pizza mine, and so then this is the auto body.
Yeah.
And then this is some suits, and yeah, so then it would be this, and then anything along these three, and sorry, go ahead.
Are we wanting to change all three of these, the whole lot?
Just these three around here on just the ones that border Third Street, and then this block. So anything on Third Street will turn red, and then everything internal. So yeah, basically any of the ones that are blue dots, would be the focus. And the idea is just to allow maybe an increase in.
These dots go on the other side of Third Street, though.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So it's both sides of Third Street will be changed
So-
or
Just on that, not the whole block. So it'll be cut up like this one is currently. But it'll be these three on the end one.
Is that?
yes. Oh, yeah. They're all currently residential property. The idea is that it would just allow, if council wanted to designate an increase in commercial activity in that spot very specifically, that provides an opportunity for that because it'll be in the village, the core commercial. The other side of it too is that it doesn't force the property owners into any kind of future use or anything. I'll be very clear about that. It's not going to change their property taxes. It's not going to change anything other than their potential. Is that if they wanted to do something that would be a little more extensive than what they're currently allowed in basically the R1 zoning, or in this case, the residential neighborhood designation, that's what this would allow. And this was just in just general conversations. This isn't something that we've gotten any kind of real feedback from the residents. This was just conversations with a couple local business owners and with council as far as this change. But again, I will reiterate that for the residents that are, you know, affected, this won't change anything for them, you know, financially or anything negative.
So have we notified these people that will be affected?
No, well, no, this is something that's, because this, if we were to move forward with this, we would. So, basically, if council agreed to this path, we would probably send that out immediately, just to determine if there's any hesitation with it. And if we don't receive anything, you would probably be, okay, we would give them that little bit of a window for feedback. But, yeah, this was just something that had come up in the last week or so. So this wasn't anything that has been thoroughly, this really just came from the public hearing and then going forward with a couple other conversations.
I think it's a logical place to extend our downtown core in the future. I just wanted to clarify, say if somebody in one of these areas was to tear down their home and want to like rebuild strictly residential, is that still?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So how will we be notifying them if we agree to do it?
Well, we would send out a letter to everybody, basically, yeah, stating that this is what the plan changes. And then ultimately, part of that will also be explaining what the differences would be between one or the other. And ultimately, in the OCP, it's not going to change really much for the owner. Again, it's going to be more what we put into the zoning that is really going to affect this, because I guess to Councillor Neal's question is, I shouldn't have flat out answered no. Yes, they can. Is that we can change that so that no, they can't but rebuild the house. I'm not suggesting that in the zoning, but that's where that would happen. That wouldn't happen in the OCP.
Right.
So, but assuming that council wasn't, you know, looking at forcing that amended development use, it doesn't, but we would have to keep that as a certain zone. And all it would do is allow, if somebody were in that area to apply for a rezoning, makes it a lot easier that they don't have to go through a zoning application and an OCP designation change, because that's a lot more of a process. So basically it would eliminate just that one step if they wanted to go ultimately commercial. Is it right? Like the zoning would stay residential, just the OCP designation would allow everything right now. But like that's the hard part with the OCP, because it's non-binding. It's just a blanket document that covers everything. It doesn't force us to proceed in any fashion with the zoning. We can read literally everything the way that it is. It's just something that we're quote unquote working towards. And if it's not now, it's in the future. So if anybody in this zone decides just to sit put, that's it. It's just doesn't affect anything. So.
I'm gonna give a suggestion. I like clean lines, to just go to 3rd Street, because that's been the confusion since I've been sitting at the table, and Councillor Heatley, is that there's only been a couple of houses off of 4th Street, or a couple of buildings off of 4th Street, and then everything else is. And then to clean it up, if we just went to 3rd Street, and if we don't even know if I would think that there's one place because they already have commercial, but the rest of them are all residential. They may not say yes anyways. Mm-hmm. But it's a clean line. But how does everybody feel about that? Because I don't know what is the point of doing 3 houses on the other side of the street, because it gives that barrier. Again, you have squirrel over here and you have an alley that breaks from a house, where this has a roadway that breaks away from the house. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I get what you're saying.
I mean, through the chair, yeah, 3rd Street's, I like the idea of the clean line. The only thing is 3rd Street's one of the large wide streets, so there's lots of room for parking and stuff. So that would be, in my mind, if those 3 residents did decide to go to some form of commercial, There'd just be more parking. That would be the only thing I could see for a benefit, having those 3 extra properties on the north side of Third Street. But yeah, I'm fine with Third Street for a community.
I think it's a good step in the right direction either way. Of the OCP, we're looking future. So nothing's happening overnight, and down the road, if our or continue to extend that way, that's something that could happen in this one. So even if we start on that one block with the main line, it's
How do you feel about the Plain line?
I could go either way, but
I'm not gonna go with.
So yeah, I think that the idea is that we'll cut it off on the south side of Third Street. And the 3 dots on the north side of Third Street will be unaffected. Yeah, I guess the one question, and this is really tied, if I want to be honest, I think around the Piper's conversation, regarding just the corner store, in the residential neighborhood. And so, just given the conversation, about having larger businesses or home-based or anything, which, I guess our residents would feel is true blue mixed use. There was just general hesitation to that. So the idea is, of course, limiting the size of allowables, so businesses on those parcels. So my suggestion is just to remove the corner store part of the definition. That said, this is where we were going to have that discussion about having the minor retail available for like the agriculture, the people that wanted to do the take it or leave it flowers, is that ultimately removing this would eliminate any possibility of any kind of retail. So whether it's a store or like we could just change this so it's not a corner store, it could be commercial activity or something that would keep that open. And then through the business license bylaw, we can limit how intense the business can be as far as area for exterior retail, because that's the concern. We allow the flower shop and now all of a sudden whoever's selling anything has shelves outside selling their wares. And I don't think that the council just, wanted to look at that side of it. I mean, if we're going to be looking at a scenario where we're doing, I say this very, kindly, but if we're going to have like a full summer garage sale everywhere because there's retail everywhere, I don't know if that's what council wants. I would feel that it would want to be a little more filtered either to the farmer's market or having a very limited I guess activity or business type that would allow the retail. So some things that, and even if it's a matter of a take it or leave it and there's not a real price structure, you could limit it to something like that. It's really difficult to enforce those sort of things, but if council was open to having that, residential retail space available for anyone, that's all that this would somewhat limit, because under the home-based business, we don't allow external retail. So we either have to allow it in the definition of residential neighborhood that we allow retail, or we change our business license bylaw to allow retail on site, which we don't allow. Like, so for somebody like an example would be, say, BOH Archery, is that they would have an online store where they have everything on Facebook and you can go there and pick up your bows and whatever have you, but you can't go into the outbuilding and it's a store. It is literally a place where you can just go and grab stuff, like something, if you were selling something on Facebook, yeah, let me grab it from my storage room or my basement. There's not a retail area. So we don't allow that now. So if we were to allow it in a home-based business, then it becomes a lot more complicated, honestly. Like, that's where this is the one instance where it's better to have something in the OCP or that designates retail space, because once we get into the business licenses, when we start classifying that out, that retail component is going to be a doozy that's going to tip certain businesses over to areas where we may not want them. And that's my only hesitation with removing something like this, where you'd have such corner stores, but it's really more how council wanted to address that minor retail on residential properties if we were to allow it. And honestly, the two requests we've had are from flower stores, so nothing extensive, but if we're painting a brush, we gotta worry about the people who are.
Through the chair, so like a commercial resale brick and mortar building, they have to follow like fire codes and a whole bunch of other codes that a residence doesn't have to follow. So that being said, I think that would right there tell me, no, I don't want to have resale in residential neighborhoods. And I agree that the corner store was a one-off. It was Piper's. Piper's been shut down a long time. I don't think there's any way that we'd be opening that up again. I do think we need to have a talk about resale in residential areas as the flower shop. VOH is one. I think I would agree with removing the corner store, and then we do need to have that, whether it be business license talk or zoning talk about residential resale. Sorry. But yeah, I would agree with taking a corner store, and if that defines that we need to have a conversation about how to meet residential resale, we definitely should do that.
Yeah, so I guess the real thing, I guess to that point is defining like the corner store versus the flower, exterior flower retail, and how you differentiate that. Like that's the tough part, because right now that corner store, that means both Piper's and that. So if we're allowing the one and not the other, it would just be now how to allow that in the OCP. So you take a corner store and you'd say retail activity per se, and then further down, we would now drill down what activity would be allowed where. But if we remove it entirely, then now we're forcing it to have in a home-based business, and then that conversation gets really touchy because we're breaking out how each business is going to be active. It's basically what our job will become, and again, this will be for 2027, not for this year, is that when our business license, all of our home-based businesses or all of our businesses apply, they're going to go through a very extensive application process than what they're used to, that's going to really define and explain what they're doing very specifically, and if there is any kind of retail component or home-based sale or any of that, so then we can take that score and score it right at the office, so we're not bringing it back to you guys unless there's a real disagreement on what the business activity is. So but limiting it is going to be trickier down below, and this is one of the few things that why you want to keep your OCP as open as possible, so that now you can limit underneath, because right now you take that out, we don't allow now anything under that. Makes what you're saying.
So I'm just gonna go on a whole other angle, as we're talking retail. We have people that sell eggs, we have people that sell chickens. It's not retail, it's food. And how do we have people that fix computers, that do small engines, and everybody likes them until they don't. So I'm really, like, I understand why if you're deciding that you're going to take Piper's out of that area, I understand maybe both sides of why or why not. I guess if you wanted to look at it, that if we are looking at this, that we're looking at 20 to 50 years down the road and not tomorrow, that there is a possibility that you do want to open something up down at that end of town, because there is a lot more people living down there. And people are, I grew up with that Piper store, and a lot more kids in this town than there is now. And none of us got run over, and we didn't have all the different things, and everybody was going to Piper's store. So I'm just concerned of us going down such a little tiny hole that we're controlling so much in where are we going to control the egg selling people right now? Because that's real, that's food, selling food. We're not doing that. Are we going to control, we're not worrying about right now, somebody that's fixing computers, somebody, we have no idea. There's so many businesses in the town that we have no idea about. And are we opening up a can of worms that we're going to chase people out of our town than actually support people in that's why they've moved to this town, is because they can work from home. They can have a little side business where they also work on top of it. So that's all I'm just bringing that forefront is I can tell you that there's 3 people up by my place that probably don't have business licenses that all have a business. So that's my only concern is how do you determine who's got a business license and who doesn't? Because maybe that person isn't actually having people come to their place and they're delivering.
So
Still a business.
it is, this is, that becomes a real conversation when it comes to enforcement. Because ultimately how it's supposed to be basically framed that if you're doing this and it's a commercial activity, you should have a business license. Now, to your point, how do we, for the people who aren't taking it out, that is enforcement is one of our large, considerations that we have with all of this. And to your point is, it's really not about, with this, if we're taking out corner store and putting retail activity, that won't necessarily change what is allowed. It's more that what that does limit is that if you're taking, it would now require a definition for retail activity versus corner store. So then now for us, when we have retail activity based in this residential neighborhood, well, what does that look like? Now, if that is a certain size of retail area, so for example, you can only have 100 square feet of display, so that would take care of the small flowers, anybody that would want to go really big. To the people selling agriculture and those, even with delivery or at home, because it's not a store, they're fine. Like they would qualify still under like home-based business minor, like that wouldn't change. Ultimately, whether they have a business license or not, we would want that. We would want them to have it. But it's more, I think, on our side of it is to look at our business community who have these home-based businesses that are maybe not very, I don't want to use the word successful because some of them aren't designed to make boatloads of money. They're just a side hustle or just something like you have a few chickens and eggs. It's more about taking those properties and saying, well, we want that to happen, but we want to help promote you. Like we want to give you bang for your buck. So if you're paying $75 for your business license, well, we'd advertise twice a year, just even posting on Facebook or wherever, the list of the business licenses and have a little bit of a blurb about them and just say like, hey, you're getting some money, some advertising for this. Like there has to be some sort of trade-off where we're not looking at it as just a one-way street where please give us your $75 for your home-based business and you don't get anything for it other than us being able to put you on a list saying, hey, you're compliant. Well, for the people who are selling eggs and the agriculture side of it, they are so off-grid just in philosophy that they're not even thinking about that, right? It's not about trying to limit those people or trying to make them compliant. It's more just selling like this is actually worth the application. And that's maybe how we would look at it, the encouraging side versus trying to limit. It's like, no, like we want you to, we're not going to like, and again, when it comes to enforcement, we're not actively chasing these people down right now just for many reasons, but it's more so that it's hard to track. Like, and again, part of it is that for those minor retailers, especially for agriculture, philosophically, as a CAO, I wouldn't want to limit that. Like, and I'm not gonna go after somebody selling 3 dozens of eggs a week in the idea that they stop that for a $75 business license, like for the community balance positive. It's not worth my time to go and find those people to make it stop it, because it actually threatens their livelihood, because they're not looking at it the same way that a brick and mortar would be. But again, this is where the enforcement side is a real challenge, because there has to be lines in the sand that we're like, for when we have these business license conversations, ones we go after, ones that we don't, because of the scoring and where they should belong and where they shouldn't. Again, that's going to be a definitely a different conversation and a difficult one coming down. But right now it's somewhat.
Okay, Councilor.
A couple things, but one, just clarifying, we're talking about taking out corner store and replacing with retail activity. We're not going to take out home-based businesses. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And where does a lemonade stand fall? Because I don't want to be one of those towns in the news that have to find some little child that is selling lemonade.
Okay, but yeah, I will give you my assurances right now that I will never, ever be looking to enforce lemonade stands under any circumstance. So.
Maybe we could have that in the OCP.
And I just noticed yesterday that we took commercial off of Piper's.
That's, I'm assuming that's.
Okay, that's why we put it here. Because I literally just noticed yesterday, I was like, wait a second, where's Piper's?
Yeah, it was tied to that, but again, if there was something, I guess to Councilor Deaton's point, if there was any inkling or possibility that they would restart, I'd happily keep them there, because it's really not any harm. You know, and frankly, the community's used to having that designation. And if I want to be brutally honest, when I was an elementary student, I loved the idea of having a corner store right across the road. So in that circumstance, we don't necessarily have to change that. It's just, if it's practically speaking, they're not going to ever do that. It's no sense in keeping it.
Do we know that they're not going to do it?
No. We can absolutely reach them.
That's my kind of thought.
I would rather have it. And for the future, then not.
Yeah, we can definitely keep it. It was more, I guess, you know, even tying into neighborhood aesthetics now, everything just.
So everybody understands though, and correct me if I'm wrong about that, if the place burnt down and they wanted to build a house, they couldn't build it the same because it's built on a commercial side, so it's built right to the edges. If they built a house, they'd have to do all the setbacks, correct?
Correct.
So if we leave it commercial and it burnt down and somebody said, oh, I want to build commercial again and build a house on top, they could do that. And build.
Or front and back like it is now. It's the storefront front and the,
As long as we leave it.
as long as we leave it commercial, that's.
Yes, correct. Yeah. That's the real difference in changing that designation, is that if we change it to the mixed use, then technically they can put a fourplex faster than they can put a store. Right, that would be the difference, is that so again, to your point, it's not, there's no harm in keeping as mixed use. So I can absolutely.
Councilor Beaton.
Thank you through the chairs to go back to the home-based business discussion. I think honestly, right now, if we had 40% compliance on business license, I'd be shocked. And I can't see, even if you change the OCP, if it's going to get any better unless we offer incentives to these home-based businesses. So I think a realistic discussion is how we can incentivize home-based businesses to purchase a business license and what it would give them. I think it's a discussion that the chamber needs to be involved in as well, because I think they really need to take charge on that. I agree that the village should have a list on a website, whatever, and give them something, but whether it be half price for the first one you purchase, or a percentage or something, we need to give these home-based businesses incentives to join up and purchase business licenses. Otherwise, they're just going to hide at the backyard like they had been doing for 30 years, and nothing's going to change. So I think that's something we really need to consider is how to incentivize business licenses for basic business.
Absolutely, and just generally speaking, I'm always in favor for incentivizing change rather than enforcing change, and particularly in smaller communities, because there's always just a lack of resources on the enforcement and the follow through. And politically, it's easier to work with everybody than trying to walk around with a hammer of authority, so to speak. So when it comes to any of the when we're talking property cleanup or any kind of promotion of enforcement, it really is trying to be encouraging rather than punitive. But there at a certain point you do need to enforce. But again, we will be dealing with those conversations later, just with general the unsightlies and everything else that we're going to be kind of reviewing past this OCP. So
Do you have any comment?
No, but, can we clarify where did we land on Piper's? Are we in agreement of leaving?
Leaving it in as commercial?
I agree. Yeah.
How do you feel? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, are we good on that one, or anybody other have any more comments?
So then it's just changing to remove corner stores and just replace that with retail activity. That's everybody can. Okay, the next public comment was just the next support for the coach houses. And just we've kind of touched on this already as far as the tiny homes and the definitions as far as what can go where. And just kind of harmonizing those details so that we can have those very specific codes for the tiny houses, and what's allowed manufactured home modulars, and then the further kind of classification about how to deal with, say, a more unique stick built construction, like we're saying, like the tiny home, somebody building a tiny home stick built versus bringing one in, because that won't have a code. That won't have a class because it's not just a manufactured unit. So it would just be trying to determine how we work through those differences, and if there's any limitation based on where we would want them to go. But
in our last OCP, there was so many definitions of all different housing, laneway housing and all of that kind of stuff. So where does, and I thought coach houses were in there, but what's the difference between a coach house and a laneway house?
that's the thing, is that right now we don't really have anything defined, and all honest, if I want to be brutally honest, that's a real culture thing, because you can use secondary dwelling. That is a laneway, that's a carriage house, that's a coach house, that is you can say a cottage package, same thing. Like it is really depending on which industry you're talking with, they'll have a different label for it. So the big thing is that for us, we would have a definition that in the OCP that would just be a general encompassing of everything. So it would be like, so secondary housing would mean a second residence on a residential property that may include, but not limited to, coach houses, tiny homes, manufactured homes, then through the list. And then when we get to the zoning, we would have specific definitions for each one of those and where they would go. So then if we wanted tiny homes, say for example, where the orange is only, then we would have that in the zoning bylaw, where we don't need to limit it here in the OCP. That's where we can get down to a garage package, a carriage house, even to our to the conversation about story height. That can all get limited in the zoning and very specifically in even sections of zoning. So, right now, it's just, I guess, allowing that any of those possibilities are allowed in residential neighborhoods. And then in the zoning, we would be able to limit what goes where, based on.
Does this sound reasonable to have two definitions? One that secondary housing within a home and secondary housing with outside of a home?
So, yes, normally what they would have is a secondary suite would be what like the mother-in-law suite or anything would be that way, or the basement suite, where the secondary housing, or you'd have, secondary dwelling or anything that to tie, yeah, absolutely. You
Because
would,
I think we're getting really
In the weeds.
in the weeds on all the different words of housing, because it's all housing.
no, for sure, no, and absolutely, you definitely have to differentiate between inside of the, primary dwelling versus the secondary, because ultimately our utility bylaw is structured differently for a suite versus a duplex.
Right.
And that's where that comes in, so, for sure.
Okay. So anything on here then, other than we talked about earlier about when we get to the zoning? So we're not gonna use, bear with me, we're not gonna use all the different words in the zoning, in the OCP, all the different housing types.
No, correct, I agree.
Is everybody good with that?
Yeah, when you get to the zoning, we will.
Then it will be different.
Just under the steps, something like
Maybe
the,
not,
I thought it was.
Yeah, we're good.
oh, I'm first.
Yeah, I guess kind of this coach, this conversation, is, I spoke to the chief and I reached out to, our ambulance, people as well. They were just on vacation, so I would get a response soon from them. But the fire chief, did, mention about, particularly like the parking and the tight corners getting, turning into the alleys, if that was the primary access. The fire department also needs about give or take 8 feet on each side for them to comfortably operate during a response. So, if there was an instance where we had a primary alley access, we would need to make sure that that alley is one wide enough. And if it's not, available to be wide enough for them, then we would require these, carriage houses to have front access. And then the point is that if we have, any sort of, I guess, restrictions or minimum standard for access. So for example, if I was a fire department or an ambulance driver, it's like, well, if I'm going to a residence and I have to bring a stretcher, I would want a hard packed surface to that door, right? Because with the residence, I'm only going 30, 40 feet before I'm at the front door. Well, that carriage house, and I'm bringing it through the lawn and everything else, that's very, very hard on those responders. So if there was some sort of restrictions or considerations we would have for that, again, that would be very custom tailored to Salmo, based on our layout. But it would be just another consideration of where we allow them, where they go, how they access. And then again, tying to our discussion with our utility bylaws, is that once those are constructed, right now, if they are going to be primary access from the laneway, then we're talking about next generation 911 addressing and designating that road as now a road from an alley, like we did with, say, like Baker Lane, for example, would follow that framework. Again, we allow all front accesses, so that eliminates that. But again, that would now hinder any of the larger parcels for subdivision development, because now it's coming in off the front. It's probably going to have to be tied to the primary residence as far as the utilities. Just all of those things. And again, this is something that a lot of this will come into when we're discussing our zoning and our utility bylaws, because where the location is of our services are going to determine what possibilities, because we have 3 utility locations, right? possibilities. Right now, they're either both on the road, both on the alley, or one in one. And so each one of those has a different construction consideration for hooking up to utilities and everything else. For like, you pull up a house, well, if you're coming from the sewer, well, that's right there. But then the water's coming all the way from the front. Well, if we're looking at stratifying or allowing stratifying, well, how does that work? Because ultimately you'd have to have easement accesses or agreements for those people so that they can access the utilities if there was something that happened. It's very complicated, but it's more just determining, I guess, from our fire chief's perspective, if we allow them, primary alley access, how do we funnel it for our emergency response? And we would treat them, say, basically like a back alley where it's like a garage, and sure, there's a house there, but it's still a back alley. And for everybody's all intents and purposes, they would be parking in that person's yard, in the parent parcel's yard, or not in the garage in the back, right? It's like they would have to have that legal access from the front for the emergency services. So just something that the fire chief was, having some concerns about is really more the access, is because a lot of our access into our alleys are, quite narrow. So then, of course, they're concerned about hitting things naturally.
Anybody have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid concern. I know not lately, but we used to get a lot of snow and alleys don't get plowed but twice a year. Sometimes not even that. So then we would have to consider civic works plowing for access for emergency vehicles. So it's definitely a snowball rolling down a hill. But I think it's a very valid concern. I don't honestly didn't think about it until I saw the report and the lights went off in my head. So it's something we need to keep in mind when we go into this, to do some considerations.
Anything else? There's a couple of things that come to my mind. First of all, when we're talking, what it sounds like is, because we're talking tight alleys, we're talking a lot of houses either downtown that have built on 30-foot lots, and don't have anything bigger than that, or down Glendale and Cottonwood and off of Birch, and those ones. And when I think of a fire truck coming to something on any one of those, is they're all going through the front yard to get to the backyard. They're not going down the alley, because the fire hydrants are all in the front.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to drive down the back to pull all the stuff in to the front. So I don't see it quite as a concern in that regard for the smaller into that. In the bigger properties, it would be a consideration of an access road that does get, because they are a lot bigger, right? And they do, and where does, but still, again, the fire hydrants are again still on the road. So that's where the fire truck is going to be out there. So I don't see quite what about the narrow alleyways. I do understand that if ambulance, because we haven't heard from ambulance, but if ambulance was having to go there, we can't make people put in sidewalks. Right now, they go over everything. They have gear that goes over rock. It's amazing what they have, and thank God that they do. But we can't make everybody put in sidewalks anyways to be able to get them safely out of there, or get that out of there. So that would be the concern, is, and the ambulance should be able to fit down any one of our alleyways right now. And yes, winter is a concern, and the alleyways are paved or plowed in the winter. They're on our plowing thing. They just are not primary. So they're the last ones to get plowed, which makes sense. So it might be something that we hire more staff if we need to do more plowing in a quicker pace in the wintertime. Like, those are the kind of things. I just wanted to make those comments because I don't think that we have quite the concern with that, unless he's thinking that they access the alleyways right now, which I don't know of any alley that has a fire hydrant down it. But maybe there is.
Yeah, that's something I reached out to Public Works to confirm where each are, like particularly the ones that are both in the alley, because I've pulled up the street that is more typical. So we do have blocks where both services are in the alley, so I don't know where specifically they're gonna get that for me. So then I can, if that's something where that's 1 or 2 blocks very specifically, that is easy to, just speak to those very specifically. This wouldn't be for the entire community, of course. Yeah, no, and absolutely. This is something that our ambulance first responders are very capable. And it would be something that if we ended up with a few permits on some street for a carriage house, we can, or even a single one, we can absolutely bring it back to council to change the priority for the snow plowing and any of that, and increase the priority of that one lane and put it into a different route if we need. That's easy to do. It would just be, very application based.
Go on to the other one.
Yeah, so then the next is just the summary of the public hearing comments. This is just kind of speaking to a little more of the carriage hosting, the inability for I guess just looking at some of the comments were about just not being very development friendly regarding some of the vacant properties. I guess, I can kind of speak to, some of those, and I did a little bit in the hearing, is that we are working with any of the developers who are looking at, some subdivisions or development. Each one is very specific as far as where they're, where we're hitting a bit of a wall, whether it's, paying for servicing or extending trunk lines, or even just general density questions, is one. Somebody, a developer is asking to put on a development that's considerably more dense than what we allow. So they're going back and forth, is trying to figure out different options, but because they haven't submitted any kind of formal application, I can't just, I don't have any avenue to bring it to you guys for consideration. Yeah, that's kind of when it comes to the housing side of it, as far as the larger developments and just I guess our inability to maybe facilitate that a little easier. I just wanted to kind of speak to that specifically. Regarding, there's several people that had come up and talked about the not wanting heavy industry or commercial on their property. Lots of questions about the secondary housing and the carriage housing, how that would work. I guess going down to the couple of responses about the parks and the gopher holes and the maintenance. As you guys I'm sure are aware, we were planning on having gopher control there today. They confirmed yesterday and canceled today. So that wasn't something that was really ideal. But the idea is that we're just operationally trying to handle the field maintenance a little differently than we have in the past. So that's I guess the reasoning or the rationale behind that.
Their schedule, sorry.
No. So they're planning for April around Easter, but because our ball people have submitted their schedule already, we're reaching out to him and trying to figure out the days and the times. What we have learned this afternoon that wasn't on any of our announcements is ultimately residents and the public just have to stay off of the field while he's working. After that, you can go on there 5 minutes after he's done. There's no day, 2, 3, 4 days that we have to stay off the field. It is literally just so we're not intrusive of operations.
Could there be a post made that the farm isn't closed because it was closed until further notice? So just,
They didn't. Okay.
I have, not that I've seen. I
No, staff was supposed to put something out saying that they were, so, if they haven't, I will definitely put that up tonight.
And
Regarding that, there's been lots of questions about, are we using this? What, like, how are we doing?
My understanding is that it is poison, I think, is that this is where, the contractor is going to send us, a bit of a communique as far as what happens, but he has been very, responsive in saying that if there are any questions that people phone him, because it's a little bit of, playing telephone, and because of just the system and how, I guess, poison is kind of, or just rodent control in general is kind of, a little bit of a touchier subject. So we're probably leaning on just getting the person doing it to explain everything. And if, we're really trying to send them, all the residents and the questions his way, because I don't want to speak for the contractor for starters, because every one of these companies tends to do things a little differently as far as what chemicals they use or their structure. So we're going to be reaching out to him to make sure that we get all that communication out. For one, a lot sooner this time, but secondly, a lot clearer as well. So.
if I may, through the chair, regarding this pest control. I do appreciate that the contractor is willing to voice questions. What I don't think is appropriate is that council and CAO don't have any idea what's going on. So for members of the public coming to us asking questions, and us just being like, I don't know, call this guy. I don't even know if that guy is. I don't know what business he works for. I should be able to tell my constituents, this is what's going on in the park. Yes, it's pest control. Yes, it's using poison. It's not going to harm our pets, our animals, our kids. It's going underground. It's not a spray. Like, these are things that we need to know as council, because people are asking us. And I know it just happened today, like with the post. There is a lot of backlash. It was yes, okay, there's another post today as well, for more clarity. Yeah. But we don't know. And I don't think that's fair as a council member who's being asked by the public what's going on. And I just say, hey, I don't. So please, if we're gonna get information, you need to do the test of the also do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was something that, if I want to be honest, they were supposed to provide us a sheet, and they did, and the date just snuck up on me, to be honest. And so definitely lessons were learned in the last 24 hours when it comes to this, full stop. So it will not repeat the same way. And what I will do is, the second I have that communication piece, I will send it to council. If there's anything that you guys would like him to add to it, just based on the questions you've been receiving, I'm happy to add that. But yeah, no, this was, again, I'll call it a mistake. It wasn't something that was supposed to happen this way, the way that it did in the last 24 hours.
Anything else?
Sorry if I may, through the chair, when it comes to the questions and responses from the public hearing, I do have an issue that it says staff and council responses. 4 council members didn't speak at all in that meeting, so I would like that it does not say staff and council, because council was involved in the responses. That being said, moving forward in a public hearing like this, as a council member, I want the ability to speak. So, in meetings past, we weren't, but moving forward, I would like to. There's a lot of concerns from the public that I did have opinions on or thoughts on. I just didn't feel comfortable enough to put up my hand. There's only one mic and there's only one person running the show.
And so the direction last time was that we were to just listen and not speak. So it was a little unclear on whether we could answer their questions. I felt that as well. And then the public doesn't have that information either. And so that looks poor on us when we're just sitting there. And
I agree with what we'll see, as well as, I've been approached by two different people that the notes that we have, our minutes are not accurate. They're missing a lot of things that were said are inaccurate. So I've got a lot of concerns about that. I really wouldn't, I mean, I would like our meetings to be recorded so that if there is any discrepancies, we can go back and do this. You know, I've felt it myself. I've that a couple of times where I think that something has been one way and it's not, you know, whether I'm wrong or not, there's no way to find out. We don't have any recording to go back to listen. And these are very incomplete minutes or notes, whichever we call them.
I just also have a thought too, like I agree, I would have liked to speak up a few times just to address some concerns. The one thing just in regard to, like CAO making that declaration that it was mayor and council, is I know, I mean, like when you become a part of a council or a committee, it's always, you always represent a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably why I communicated that way, but I do agree that it would be more representative of the truth if we had more structure on this and addressing some stuff.
They are minutes of a meeting, so they should be accurate to.
Yes, and I do agree on the, sorry for this. I do agree on the recording piece because then you can always go back and know what exactly did they say there and actually get that stuff. Because I know it was probably, I don't take notes very fast. Some of that was pretty fast paced. And so we're coming, so.
Should format?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things, I guess, with this is that there is a lot of, I guess, for a lack of a better term, gray area or I guess jurisdiction that the corporate officer has with these minutes or with this tracking of these responses. Is that ultimately in the legislation, what needs to happen is its name, address, and then and then basically that is pretty much it as far as what is required. As far as outside of, you have to speak to the comment that was being put out there. So it could be something as simple for one of these is say taking, let's go Doug Lockwood, just for the sake of argument, been on the board of variance for 11 years. Industrial notice to be like, you could have that it's like board of variance member, no industrial in the OCP. Like it's like you can have it and or eliminate all of it and just basically this is the hard part, is that ultimately it is about how you want the information to be communicated as far as a summary. There's not any requirement to have things verbatim or quotes or anything else, because I'll just be honest, is that the legislation goes back 20 years. Unless we've hired a court reporter, it's pretty hard for somebody to be typing as fast as that happens. So the idea that that was an expectation, it's not really, I will just say, grounded in reality, especially if in a meeting like that, I'm supposed to be referee and writer at the same time. Impossible. I'll just say that I can't listen and type at the same time and try to respond. I have to do one or the other. So this is where, for the public hearings in some of these, like in the youth center, we can definitely work with Laura, the executive director, to set up cameras and recording. In here, it's easier. We can just transcribe and record like the other municipalities do. This is a small enough space. But in those other hearings, it's going to be a challenge without having something really reported, because just even to your guys' point, the structure just doesn't allow for certain things. And without having basically a mic in front with that laptop transcribing right from the mic, there's going to be mixed, like even where my laptop was sitting, to have the distance between that and the microphone, it would have not picked up it very correctly, if I want to be brutally honest. because the microphone wasn't tied into the laptop, like if we would have roped it right into the machine, it'll pick it up, but if it's just bouncing off the walls of the youth center, it's gonna end up with a bit of a mixed bag that way as far as the results. So definitely I'm okay with all of that. When it comes to this specific response, I can definitely go back to a little bit more of the I guess the raw version of the data and separate what my comments were versus the mayor's as far as the staff and council response to Councillor McKellar's point. That's exactly why I did that is just lumping staff and council into one. But I do get everybody's questions on that. So I can definitely split that out. But when it comes to this report and how it's structured, I will say that this is a learning experience. And next time the responses and the questions are going to be a little more tailored to what is a little bit less controversial, because I will say that my notes that I took were very, very basic, and so it's just a matter of making sure that for that I reflect that instead of trying to maybe open up context for it, because it's not, if everybody was expecting this to be verbatim, I would have told everybody that it's not. Don't expect that if you're, and this is a summation of it. So if there's something that isn't exact, I mean, it's something that, again, I will read the comments that I've gotten in the emails that we've received as staff for the criticism on this, and look at how we can make it easier for everybody, because I don't want this to be a point of contention in the idea of misspeaking or writing something down that was maybe not said or what have you. And I think putting in the recording framework will help with that. But I don't think that this will ever be a perfect process, even with AI being able to hear everything. So I would just say that for that, for the people who are wanting something verbatim, just be ready to be disappointed, because it's going to be very difficult to do that. But
So I'm just going to make a couple of comments. So it does state when I answered. So under Elena, I asked her, clarified where she got the information. That was all. And also here where I gave the gentleman that was talking about the bike park, and because the CAO had not given me full information, and that was it. And also the public hearing again was an opportunity to attack the mayor, and that's not what was about. And I clarified that I was not the president of the Lions, and that was the amount that was spoken. So if you guys needed more clarification or something, you guys, because that's all I was asking was clarification from Lorena. So I apologize that you guys are disappointed in that. Excuse me, you're the public and you are not to speak during the meeting.
Derek, I didn't mean what I said as an attack on you in particular. It would have been very hard to make these.
oh no, and I don't.
So don't take it that way, because I couldn't have done it.
No. I'm not taking that as that at all. If I was coming out.
I do understand that the legislation, but I also would like us to be better than the legislation. And hence why I mentioned recording, because then that would make it easier all around. Or even, I mean, if you're a referee, maybe we should have someone else taking the notes. You know what I mean? Because that is a lot for one person to be trying to concentrate and write and answer all at the same time.
No, absolutely, and we've talked about that even with staff, because our deputy corporate officer, she had mentioned that there was meetings in the past where she would attend online and be typing feverishly from her desk. So that's something that definitely, again, within our council meetings and anything within this room, it will be easy to get around that. It would just be more of the public hearings that we would maybe want that second person. And to your guys's, to your point, that can, if that is a better opportunity for success in transcribing those meetings, then yeah, I would probably lean towards bringing in another staff member rather than trying to piece it together with AI.
That's,
So we can definitely look at that for the next one, because we will have to have another public hearing for this legally, after the first reading. So, but hopefully, that will be something that there'll be just kind of a bit of a rubber stamp as far as any kind of last bit of changes or what have you. And then, yeah, I guess just a couple other points. We're looking at the well site on 9th Street. There was a question about turning that into a park. We have to do a lot of consideration for the decommissioning of the wells and demoing a lot of infrastructure to get it to even to a point where it's ready to do anything with it, even as a park. That said, that there's a lot of opportunity for development. So that would be something that we have to be talked about. That's just those properties behind Southcrest, for reference. Yeah, as far as, carriage houses, and the one comment about, with the carriage houses worrying about Airbnbs and the noise and it being like kind of a party, atmosphere. That's something that, we can address. It's going to be hard on the enforcement side, particularly because, those complaints are going to happen after hours. And that's just going to be very difficult for us to handle. The only thing would be is to try and get ahead of it, and depending on where council felt about short-term rentals for Airbnbs, whether we allow them in those secondary suites or if we want permanent residency, we can definitely have something in our bylaw that frames it that way so that it is for residents. Again, I'm not saying that the council necessarily wants to do that. That's entirely your call. But if there was concern about those carriage houses turning Salmo into a college town, so to speak, there's ways to limit some of that. It's going to be tricky, but it's more going to be on the property development side and dealing with the owner. Once it's built and the people are in there, that's going to be harder to, again, enforce because most of these complaints are going to be after hours. So that would be the one sort of thing. And then, there was just the comment from Henry Huser about the expansion of the downtown that we talked about earlier. And then, there was a bit back and forth about the concession building and the parks and the budget side of things. That again is more budget talks and how council prioritizes things. When it comes to the future of the concession and what happens with that, in general, with the parks plan, with that, like currently we do have money in the budget for engineering the plan of that building. And so then that conversation can continue, but it's more determining once the park plan, master plan is completed, what the priorities are, where we're spending the funds, etc. So outside of that, I think there was just a lot of general concern about the previous draft bylaw as well. That was something that again I will, I guess, explain or say this to council just on record, is that bylaw, because of the process that we're going through, is not going to look anything close to what it is now. It's just our processes and how we're handling our business license bylaw discussion, and all of that will no doubt affect that draft bylaw greatly. So if there's anybody really using it as a reference, I would be more comfortable with them using what we have currently in place versus what we're changing it to, because there's a lot in there that just doesn't apply anymore for what we're doing. So I'm very concerned that there's a bit of the public looking at that draft, because it's one, it's a draft, so it's not real per se, but the other side of it is that based on our discussions that we've had so far, once we get to the first reading, side of it, that's when staff will be able to really start manipulating that zoning bylaw and get it to where we're after, closer to the discussions that we need to have further on. But right now, that draft hasn't, like, it is not what I would say is very relevant to current discussions. And I'm not saying that you're throwing out the whole thing, but in the same breath, if people are worried about what's in there ending up in the final product, too soon for that discussion. It really is.
Is that not the one that was the first reading was rescinded?
Yeah, it's like the draft 8, yeah, or the draft 9, or even
Doesn't
the ones.
even pertain to anything.
No, it doesn't. It was just something in the public hearing and for the days.
Those are all thrown. Start the zoning now, we start at the one we're using.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
We don't look at those.
Yeah, I mean, if there's certain things, that were, are in that draft that, would modernize things when it comes to the legislation with the housing and all that, like that stuff would probably be somewhat fine. But when it comes to anything for what we're talking for for businesses and carriage houses and all of that, none of it is really applicable, because even our conversation about where the property access is and all of that, like that is very, very specific conversation that we would have never been able to plan around last time. If I want to be brutally honest. So,
Can we go to the map just before we leave this first part? So there's a couple of questions now. So the map was page 207. I believe that because I've got a few different packages.
That's correct.
Thanks.
okay,
So everybody puts Salmo at the top. What it's seeing is that this whole thing says that it's park, right over here. And this is a park. This is the 9th Street Park, and it just kind of got deemed as a park.
yeah, so
Oh, sorry, it's
institution.
institutional, sorry,
Yeah.
put parks, the question mark, thank you.
So, yeah, sorry, that should be broken up, that the park will be green, and then the other part will be industrial, or will be institutional, sorry, not industrial, institutional.
Yes, okay.
Because there's current infrastructure on there. If it was just green space and there was nothing there, we'd probably call it a park.
Right,
Because now it's a something,
so, but this.
but that will be,
It's been-
that's an error.
Oh, okay.
It's just where Ninth Street
Yeah.
Park is, just.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wondered was, I know that we, all of our police station and fire hall and ambulance and everything is institutional? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's changed. Springboard Park, I know that it's not within our boundaries, but is there any way that we can put it with a color?
Yeah, I don't think they would have a problem with that. I don't know what.
And same with our, because it makes it, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter, but I had somebody just yesterday looking at it because we're doing the master plan for the RDCK. And they're saying, no, you don't have a park called Springboard Park. And I'm like, yeah, actually we do. So, and it was because they were looking at this map.
Right.
And because it's here, the Springboard Park, but it shows that it's an area G, right?
No, and that's the funny thing is that it's really, this is where our scenario is very unique with those two properties, because technically speaking, and the cemetery, thank you, 3. Ultimately, we don't get a say on it. If we want to be like, that's the RD that has to pick that. Again, we can change our colors, but it's like, none of it will be binding. So we can change switches to the Springboard to green, and then the other two I would probably call as institutional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I guess the hesitation with that is that I wouldn't want anybody thinking that we have jurisdiction over that.
Right.
Because ultimately, even if we were to improve our shop, we have to take a building permits with the RD. That's not something we can just,
Yeah,
so that was always,
Okay.
but really it's no harm, doing
now
it.
the other one is, Phelps's property, so right beside the Legion. It's institutional, and I'm wondering if it shouldn't be commercial core. Or should it stay, because it used to be residential, so
Yeah, I mean,
right beside Kidney Park,
because it's ours.
Yeah.
it's
ours.
Yeah, and that's really the reason is that it's ours. I mean,
Is that the reason?
we can, calling something institutional in our plan or in our designation, what that allows is that basically when it's institutional, it becomes something similar to direct control, where anything that gets done has to go automatically through council for a decision for anything. So what this would do if we zoned it anything other than institutional is then it opens up a possibility for a use that we may not want, like this protects council in us keeping it this way, is what I would say, is that if us changing it to core commercial. Now, if we wanted to put something different that didn't match core commercial, we got to have our own public hearing for everything just to change it to something that we want to do. Where if it's institutional, it's all our call, and ultimately the public doesn't get too much of a say because it's our property and we're doing it for like infrastructure purposes. It's not something that would affect anybody else. So that would be the only thing, is that we could change it to something, but then if we deviated, like if it was residential before, there are possibility of say having a fire hall, if we ever needed to rebuild our fire hall, we'd have to go through a public hearing process for us to just build a fire hall, where it's like we should really be going through those
Right,
hoops.
okay.
And that's the only reason. That said though,
Okay. And that's great. I just noticed, where I've had my marks on here. The other thing is where the pool and the tennis courts, we have that as institutional, and that was one thing that they had said that we had to do, is keep it park and recreation.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, should we be moving that back to park and recreation?
We absolutely can. The reason for institutional zoning is just to recognize that it's government owned is really all that it is. There's not anything, again, same thing. It's kind of tying it to direct control, but again, if the RD and everybody would like to see it parks, it's zero, like it is.
It wasn't the RD, it was the school board, right?
Okay.
And it wasn't parks, it was recreation. And that's what this is now, is parks and recreation, so
Right.
that's the only thing, but if institution allows for parks and recreation, then, but it allows for other things, and I think that was a concern.
Yeah, basically, well, what that means from our perspective, if I'm looking from the school district, well, we're not owners of it anymore, but like for the regional district, what that would require is institutional. If it was recreation, anything that was in recreation and they wanted to just do, we couldn't, there's no vetting for us. It's if they need the building permits, they can just double the pool size, where, we would be like, oh, we maybe not want that as a community per se. Where institutional, anything that happens on that property comes to this table, no matter what. If they want to extend the fence where they would require a building permit because the fence is too tall, then they're coming to council for the approval. It just gives council that ultimate say on these properties, that ultimately removes some of my authority for those, that it allows you guys to make the final decision. So in practical speaking, like, are we worried about the regional district doing anything with those two properties that we wouldn't want? Not at all. So to the point, if it's more comfortable for everybody to see it green, that's literally the only difference, is that gives that any kind of work would have to come through council for a decision. That's really what the institutional zoning does.
Okay.
Um,
That was my questions on that. just because we went through all of this.
Yeah, no, and for council, again, like anything that's institutional that can be classified as a park, it is again, okay, because that park zoning is very limited in what you can apply for permits for. So even then, it's going from the most safe to the second safest. So, the next is just the OCP, survey results. So, yeah, I guess this is just the copy of the survey itself, going through, and I guess there's been, enough time to kind of, review the findings, of it. Really, I think the big thing is that there's a big, chunk of the community that is, very happy with Salmo being Salmo, and they love keeping that community, small town integrity. The challenge, of course, is always balancing rising costs and development to balance those things out, because, we can say we put a full stop on development. That's great. Well, costs go up every year. Everybody's prices are going to go up because of that. So then, but in the same breath, we don't want apartment buildings everywhere, because that loses Salmo's flavor. So there's always that kind of challenge, and I think that, if I want to be honest, our council, is handling this the right way as far as progressing through the carriage houses and the density for, the larger properties consistently. So it's just now figuring out the little nuances, for where we want everything, particularly on the home-based business side and the, increasing the residential density. Really, another thing is that people are very happy with, the events that we put on, would love, a little more, tying to our history and to our, just community itself, is that we have a very good, event. Everybody likes that it has that small town feel to it. It's not like you're going to a trail or a Nelson event. It's like Salmo is, notably simpler as far as a program, and people flock to that nowadays because everything has gotten so commercial and complicated that you come here and you see the very low key, nonprofit, volunteer base, and that really sings with a lot of people, which, because of its uniqueness, because everybody else is very, down that, trying to turn themselves into a big city, where we're, very counterculture that way, which is to our benefit. I think it provides us a little bit of a niche for the Kootenays, that we, anybody that's tired of that hustle and bustle of the Nelson or the come to Salmo. A lot of the comments were, about it being quiet, being close to nature, having that, again, our trails, our ski hill, our golf course, all of those recreational amenities, close to us, which is something that I think that we have, a lot of community pride for some of these. Of course, there's always things that the people are asking for as far as improving, but it's always usually tied to having a little more business, selection with every small town, a little more industry, a little more, a few more amenities depending on what they want. And every town is, very specific as far as what they're after. For us, people love our, trails, and biking spaces. So, it's really, just if I'm reviewing the sense that there's not a whole, big, long to-do list of the village, everybody is quite happy. Again, everybody wants to see improvements, for, the town generally, but there's, a lot of people are looking at this town, and it's like, you read this and you can't help but feel proud to live here. That's all I'll say, is that people are very passionate about what they want, embracing the arts and the community itself and you know, the businesses and, you know, the downtown core and looking to improve that just as far as, you know, making our town, the people, maybe making it, showcase the way that the people who live here understand and get what a great town it is, maybe doesn't show that on the surface, you know, and I think that is, you know, the general sense is that everybody is very happy with what they have. They don't want too many changes, but a lot of it is just, you know, sprucing us up a little bit as far as, you know, some of the unsightlies or, like I said, a few more little amenities, you know, beautifying downtown, just, you know, kind of the same, really the very same, you know, focus that is in our current OCP. There's really not a lot of deviation where the town is saying we're doing something a whole bunch, you know, incorrect. Is that we have things that we need to improve on, as every town does. But I think that generally speaking, this was a very positive survey, positive results as far as giving a good feel that people like living here and they want to do what we have to, you know, and our priority as a village is to work really hard in balancing that feel with, you know, managing growth and costs, right? And so outside of that, that's kind of where I'll just leave it, is we've had enough time to, I guess, review this as far as anything specific that we can comment on, but
Is there any questions on the OCP? Or the survey?
good, thank you.
There's lots of good feedback. And then, definitely noticing a few themes, internet, unsightlies, lots of feedback about liking, wanting to see our community spruce up a bit. Lovely. Yeah, it was good insight into where some more people are that might not.
I suggested earlier, as a joke in the office, that we raise the taxes 79% and we can do a quarter of what's in the
Yeah.
survey.
No, and to your point, yeah, no, I think it is really now, you know, taking this feedback, and if we were to, you know, put it in a list and, you know, bring it back to the public and say, well, okay, well, what would everybody be comfortable, yeah, paying, not just saying yes to that certain improvement, but then now what is it gonna cost? So, no, and this is why we do this, so that, you know, the council has a good vision of, you know, community priorities, and again, it's our job and, you know, my job, that if the community wants something, you know, that is maybe outside of our ability or our scope, that we're just explaining that. You know, if somebody wanted us to have an enclosed hockey rink, well, yeah, we can, but to your point, raising taxes 79%, that's a low number for something like that. So it's just, you know, more making sure that, you know, we can balance that. And then, of course, you know, for things that may have grant opportunities and collaboration opportunities, it's absolutely trying to seek those out. But I think it's, yeah, really important that, you know, from this feedback, we get somewhat of a list of changes that we can consider as a village. And, you know, of course, I would provide the operational context and considerations, and you guys would make of course, the final decision. But I think that this is a good start. And to Councillor Neal's point, there were some common themes that can be, you know, addressed very specifically. And then depending on where council wants to take it is whether we would follow through with it and at what level of enthusiasm. So.
Anything else on that? Okay, let's. Page 141.
Yeah, so this is just something, a little bit of a note that I had, we had kind of discussed. This really is just trying to break down the process of going through the OCP versus the zoning bylaw versus the business license bylaw. And really trying to, I guess, emphasize that it is a bit of a filtering process, that up at the OCP, there's really, you know, not too many things that are controversial or the limit or, you know, or allow too much, within it. It's really when we get down to the zoning bylaw and start classing our businesses, and even to the point of, what kind of businesses we want. I guess in my couple meetings that I've had with the council individually, it's basically the starting point for the large conversation for what is allowed where is, I say this facetiously, but like everybody close their eyes and picture what the most intense home-based business that you would want in the community. And then now, where would you want that to happen? And again, home-based only. Anything more than that, we're not allowing. So then now, okay, where would that go? And then that is now the starting point. Where the bottom point, we know what the least intensive business would be is basically just your internet sales, where there's no, nothing that would differentiate that traffic between residential traffic. And then, or any kind of activity. And then just slowly working through that process and taking into consideration like noise, smell, parking, light, the infrastructure loads that it would have, and then general neighborhood impact, community need, taking all those things into consideration and basically providing an ability to score those out. And so what will happen is in subsequent conversations, we will go through each of these and determine if this is one, what we want to be judging the businesses on. Two, what the differentiations in that scale. So if we're going 0 to 10, what would, for noise pollution, 0, obviously we know that would be nothing, but 10, okay, we know that it's a rock concert next door, so to speak. Well, then now what is a 6, what is a 7, what is a 4? And if this is measured by decibel level, or if this is based on, something that we have, but we have a few people just jump off.
Okay.
So it's really going to be those discussions that are going to determine where everything sits, because ultimately that score and that class will determine the class 1 to 7. We're going to differentiate of where everything goes, but then the score will determine where each business sits within that score. So to my point earlier is like you'll have 2 welding businesses that will have different classes because of what they are doing specifically. So one person is operating between 11 and 3 and they're working inside a vehicle or inside of their shop. Well, that will be very low intensive, where if somebody has space outside, they're working from 8 in the morning. But basically right now our quiet hours are from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. If they're operating in there, that would maybe be a different score if we wanted to limit hours and have hours of operation have a weight. That's something we can also consider. It is really any kind of scoring system that we would want to use that would funnel properties in places we want versus where we don't. And ultimately, it'll be us picking the system. And then now, once I have that system, staff will be able to review the business license bylaw or applications as they come in once we are able to score it, because there'll always be ranges within certain things like, for example, noise pollution. Once we're walking around with a decibel meter, there's going to be a range. And so there's always going to be a bit of discussion, but it's really going to be based on a really concrete system as far as what they're doing and being able to, vet it so that the 2 or 3 points that you may be different on each one are not going to shift it from like a 2 to a 6, where you're going to have a 3 or 4. And in most cases, the 3 or 4 are going to be allowed in the same places. So again, that's where some of this will get into a deeper conversation, where that will be, again, the difficult side of this. But as of right now,
Counselor, but
I guess with, and I see some value to the system for sure. My concerns would fall under making sure that that it's rating fairly and that it's not filtering people at a consistent basis, that it's fair for everyone and everyone's going to have the same opportunities. So that would be my concern, and just paying attention to that moving forward.
No, agree. That is one of the biggest concerns as far as when we start scoring this, that staff are able to have a consistent framework that the points are really gonna say deviate probably 5 points out of the 70 total. So then now staff isn't making a really big determination. It's really the business owner telling us what they're doing is going to, basically almost like a choose your own adventure. It's you're going into here and then, you're gonna end up as a level 3 or a class 3 business, and based on hours of operation, well, based on all of this. And they might, again, tweak a little bit, but we will, that's something that we're gonna talk about as a group.
Second question is, will this, like for current people who currently have a business license in Salmo, when they have to renew, will they have to go through this process as well?
Yes. Yes, there is going to be an opportunity, there's going to be a potential for some of the people that are operating more extensively than what we want to happen. Those are going to be current conversations, ultimately because business licenses are annual applications, is that the second somebody's not complying, we don't have to issue a business license. However, politically, that's very insensitive because somebody that's been operating for 20 years are just taking away their livelihood. So in instances where we may have some cases where they're allowed now, but won't be, we're going to be working with them to try and get them as compliant as possible. But ultimately, there is an opportunity for us, and we can talk about this when we get to that. At what level am I enforcing things? Because I can, for some specific businesses, like I know some of them are sunsetting, like the person's going to retire in a couple of years. So what the issue is now won't be basically once this process is up. But to your point, for anybody that's coming in new or anybody that's kind of on the fence whether we're going to allow it, we're going to work with them. We're not going to shutter the businesses. But that is a difficult conversation for staff as far as, trying to work with them as far as like limiting hours or somehow trying to, tailor their operations so it's a little less intrusive to the neighbors. But there'll be conversations. And again, it's going to be a matter of encouraging rather than enforcing for this, because unless there's something that we really don't want it to happen where it is, for example, then that's going to be the political touchiness, is that, yeah, there may be an opportunity where we're closing somebody because you're operating a welding shop or auto body business or whatever. Welding shop is just something that was in the public hearing, but just a business that we wouldn't want there. Well, then, yeah, we're going to eventually have to look at forcing them out at what time period. That's the conversation. But hopefully that is going to be 1 or 2 places at maximum, because I would ask council, like, just again, close your eyes and see which properties would exist in that framework currently, Councilor Neal, and then that would determine how many we would have. Like, if you know any of the people we don't want in those particular areas now, those are the ones we're worried about. So if it is, say, a welding shop or what have you, those are going to be the really specific one. Anything new, we'll be able to look at those out so that they won't happen.
Councilor Beason.
If I may, through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting by half an hour, but at that same time, I would like to give the public their opportunity to speak as well.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Anybody else have anything else? What was just being talked about? I have a couple questions. That home-based businesses that will be put through a vetting process by council. I have a couple of concerns about that for the simple fact that I'm not sure how many meetings we would have to be able to vet all the businesses. And is it better to actually have a matrix? I know that there's, different things that you have, but a matrix that's set up that it stays in operations, because it is a very operational thing that to have, it doesn't matter what council is sitting here, that's very operational for any council to be deciding. And when you do that, then there is that opportunity of, you know what, I don't like that kind of business. We're gonna guarantee it's happened years ago at this council table, chase a business out of town, and I think that we're at a good spot where it stays in operational now, and so I would be concerned that we would be going backwards.
Oh, no, and so to speak to this, it's really more for council to review the original framework. Is that it would like, council will not be taking a list of business licenses and going through them for the record. It is just, yeah, no, that is not meant, like the business types as far as like, when I was speaking, it's not the actual businesses, it's like looking at a welding shop. Or just keep with the welding shop, that based on the activities in here, well, what's the lowest welding shop? What's the biggest welding shop that we can have? Obviously, the biggest one would be a 7. We wouldn't want that in very specific places. Well, what's the least intensive welding shop you know? Well, what class would that be? And then now that would be my beginning starting point for creating, like to the point of a matrix. This will be, once we go through this and determine how we score this, that'll be the matrix that's created. You guys are going to look at this once.
Okay.
And then through the application process, I'll be able to go through all of each individual application and score it myself.
So then my other one is number 8, where it says usually in only very specific places in town, not entire blocks. So I'm wondering, is that the zoning is only going to be zoned for that one block?
Well, no, I guess what this is kind of referencing is that, say for class 7, we would want that's the most extensive use for a home-based business we would want. Well, say for example, our spot where we're expanding our downtown port, that would be the only spot that we would allow it, but it won't have its own zoning. It'll be from 3rd Street to here. And then it's not an entire area. Like you could do that, say, for example, for any property that we would want an amended development use. Again, that's why I mentioned about a specific place in town, not blocks, but you can break it up how finite you want. Like in theory, I'm not ever suggesting this, and I don't want anybody to misconstrue this, but you can have a point where you get ridiculous and have every property have its own zoning. And so you can, obviously we're not doing that, but the idea is that you can take these business license classes and put them in very specific spots. They don't have to be tied to a color.
I realize that, but that's what like we'll use Piper's again.
Mhm.
It's only little spot, and it would be absolutely horrifying in the office here for staff to be able to go, oh geez, where are you? Yeah, you bought that house, you can only have this kind of business. You can't have, like, so that's how I'm reading it, and so that's my concern.
Yeah, no, and the thing is that because of the annual application process, is that ultimately if there was a change in philosophy, it can be reviewed. But this is more trying to, I guess, maybe give council the opportunity to say that if we want a business in a spot, it's not tied to a color. So if we want class 7 welding, that doesn't mean that it's everywhere orange or everywhere yellow. It's like this spot. And that was all I was speaking to, is that you can, with these classes, you can get as specific of where you want them. Not necessarily tied to zoning or land designation, but even property characteristics. You can go size, you can go street address, like to my point about extending the downtown. You can split that up any way you want, as far as that. So this is just speaking to that possibility that if we allow class 7 at this spot, it's not opening up that we have to allow it everywhere with that same designation or zoning. It's council really will have the ability to pick and choose what intensity of business, like again, and it's not about welding shop, like that's where this to remove the politics of it is that it's not just a welding shop can't go here. What kind of welding shop are they operating? If they're at Mickey Mouse and they're in their garage and they're operating for 3 hours a day, yeah, that's probably going to be a 2 or 3. Well, that can pretty much happen anywhere because it's not going to be intrusive to the neighbors. The buddy who is welding and hammering outside for 8 hours a day, that's different. So then that will have a different classification. So then now that guy can only go, or that business, sorry, can only go to that particular area. But that can be determined very specifically at that time.
Okay, sounds very confusing to me. Okay, anybody else on those ones? We'll go on to, so you, number 10.
So yeah, 10 is just classing it again, just figuring out this is very, rudimentary as far as like we haven't gone through as far as since classing. It's just more saying that there's a class of 7 and it's going from 0 to 70. This is something the council can also extend or expand upon or shrink. Like if the council only wanted 5 classes, we can look at that. If council wanted 10 classes, to split it up a little more and then have the scoring scale a little different. All of that is up for discussion as far as the actual process and how we get into these definitions, because I think that's going to be very important for us to go through and for everybody to have comfort with that, because ultimately once we go through that, council will there's not going to be much decision left as far as where things are allowed. So that is it.
I'm gonna ask the question, what about if we don't know there's a business?
Back to the enforcement side of things. Yeah.
I always say you shouldn't make laws that you can't enforce. So that's right. So it's a tough one.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
So and then just going down into the business license bylaw, this kind of just speaks to what we would be vetting and limiting the business's hours of operation, parking, signage, all of that. Same with that retail space or not, if that was going to be part of a classification or if that was just something that we would blanket rule everybody.
Is there any way that we as council interested in entertaining parking? Right now we have 2 spots that has to be for everything, every house or any secondary house, doesn't matter what it is, you have to have 2 parking spots. And I'd like to see if you guys would entertain that anything under 1,000 square feet, sorry, not 1,000 feet, 1,000 square feet, that it's 1 parking spot. So if somebody had 3 apartments on a lot, that they only have to have 3 parking spots, so 1 for each.
Isn't that in zoning?
Pardon me?
Is that in the OCP?
No.
It's in zoning.
Yeah, but it's part of the parking.
Yeah, no,
I'm not talking about business, this is just about the housing, because you brought up parking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And parking is a big consideration when we're talking about these carriage houses or even increasing any kind of business licensing for the properties. Is parking is always usually the first complaint from the adjacents. Depending on where council felt for, I don't know if this is a different consideration if we're talking about, say, a new housing development, or if this is a carriage house, because we'll have a scenario where our primary residences will be required to have 2, but then the secondary will need 1. Just taking that into consideration. But so
I just want to remind you guys about like 20 minutes if we can rein this in so members of the public can have an opportunity.
there's a foreign process only.
So, okay.
So then, basically that's kind of really where it would be, where I would kind of leave it off. It is really a lot of the conversations as far as the nuances of what we allow where are in subsequent discussions. It's just, from the OCP's perspective, making sure we're not limiting anything further down, so. It's kind of early, but
Anything else on that? Did you want to go to that?
I guess, yeah, I can touch on it real quick. This is just really the idea of how the colors are gonna be working in the map. Is that it's gonna start with a parent color, and then in the zoning, they're gonna deviate to two, shades of that color so that it's easier kind of breadcrumbing it. So if somebody's a yellow, they know they're yellow. In anything, it's just gonna determine, well, which yellow are they? They're not gonna be a red or an orange or a blue or a green. Blue or green, I'm being facetious, because that can only be us, but for any of the other ones, you'd have that breakup where you have a core commercial and then 3 different commercials. It's just following a color scheme so that it's easier to understand and follow come the application process. So.
Anything else? So
Yeah.
everything you went over is all in here?
No, the thing is that any of the suggested changes are not in there. Because it would be more about what we're approving versus what we're not. Because I didn't want to put it in and redline and include words, council wasn't going to consider 3/4 of what was in here. We'd have to just pull it out. So now it's just easier to, what we've said yes to just import it. So this is pretty much, it is the same draft that you would have seen last time. The only difference is that there might have been some of the grammatical errors is changed, or like the numbers, but nothing structural.
Upside down. Okay. Okay, so do we have anything, so what the CAO is saying is that so everything that we've gone through and commented on already is he's gonna do it for our next meeting, or
Yes.
our next meeting. So this is your time to give any more feedback before we go into public.
Yeah, so I guess just to finalize the process, yeah, we'll go through this on the first reading. We'll have, the idea is I'll have the first reading on the 14th. And then we would be booking another public hearing because legally we have to, soon after. But I can, if we're gonna, we can talk about that on the 14th as far as scheduling a date. If there was a time, like a Monday, the Monday after, which is what, the 20th, we can preemptively put in a date there just because we know Mondays typically work for everybody, but outside of that, we can wait as far as booking that.
The Monday, like after,
So our 14th is our meeting, and then the 20th.
yeah, there's a,
Okay. Okay, so then no, we can schedule it at that meeting. We can look at the 14th and book something in for that. And then once that public hearing happens, we can do second, third, and the Okay.
so, okay. So we'll start on Observer. Do you have anything, it's public question time, do you have anything for us? Hearing nothing, we'll go to the public and we'll start, if you say your name, please.
I can go last.
Can you start with you?
Sure, if you like. Mostly I just have comments. My name's Mel. I mainly around two things. I very sincerely hope to find a way to differentiate between the type of retail applications like flower farms and things like that than like a full-blown retail operation in someone's home. I feel like that has the potential to really be a strength for Salmo. Get people from out of town walking around, visiting the town, etc. It could be a really cute little opportunity for people. So I sincerely hope to find a way to differentiate between that. I don't know whether it's like the amount of floor space that it can be. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And sort of similarly with the carriage houses, tiny homes kind of thing, I do feel like there's some flexibility to just make a blanket rule against RVs being able to be classified as a tiny home, whether it's some kind of home-like aesthetic rather than people just, because nobody wants down next to an RV or like multiple RVs, like, but, I do think that, yeah, expanding that kind of residential potential. And same thing goes for Airbnbs, like lots of towns are putting a cap on the number of Airbnb applications that can come in. You could put something like that into your legislation around tiny homes being able to be used and approved for Airbnb purposes, X number per year, whatever. Like, there's so much potential. There's so many other places that those kinds of things have been enacted, and I think that you can have a bit of both, right? Because we need both. We want some really creative, cute little places for people to stay in town, because I've had friends that have had weddings and they really struggle to find places because the hotel will be fully booked, and you know the motels are fully booked, and they look for other little like neat places, and there's a bit of a lack of that. So I wouldn't want that to be like completely ruled out for people, but I do think that trying to improve, like get more houses for people to actually live in is important too. So I hope you can find some balance with those items.
Thank you. Sure.
Thanks. So I just want to say, like, this has been the first meeting I've sat through the whole thing, and perhaps a suggestion at the beginning would be to let us know what the rules and expectations are, so that we know. The other thing I have a few things to say. One of the things, I did send an email because I was someone who talked extensively at the community center. The minutes or notes that were taken and posted do not reflect that. And I appreciate Councillor Linz and Councillor Heatley for bringing that up, because I think if you are going to do it at all, it needs to be done accurately. So if you don't need to do it, don't do it. If you're going to do it, then I feel like it needs to be right, because my portion has been absolutely misrepresented publicly, and that's a problem for me. I spoke, like I said, extensively. I said a lot of things multiple times versus someone who stood up one time for 3 minutes, and every point that they said is written down accurately, but pretty much everything I said is misconstrued, and that to me is problematic, because it seems like the people that were accurately quoted or noted had different things to say than those of us that didn't. And that matters. It matters when it's being put out to the public and a representative of what the community is saying. If it's not accurate, it's a problem for me as the person who is saying it, and for the community that expects to be represented accurately. So a suggestion in my email is exactly what was said tonight is, I don't think that it's fair that the CAO tries to run the meeting, say all the points, answer all the questions, and take notes.
Do you have a question for us? Because it's public question time.
Question time. Okay. My question is, I still, as a community member, don't understand the purpose of changing the zoning. So, or not the sort of the land use designation. I don't understand why it matters. What certain houses are red. I don't understand changing the multi-use. We asked this the other night. It came up with the councillors here a couple of times. I still don't feel like there's an answer. So to say we'll talk about it next time, or then like it still doesn't understand that why are we doing it? I feel like there's a reason that we're not hearing about. So that's one of my questions.
Sure.
Why are we?
So I guess when the two designations, okay, so I guess the dark red, that's all commercial. That's zoned core commercial. Everything that's orange is residential, same with the yellow. Right now, as far as the thing with the OCP is because it is meant as a guiding document, nothing is binding. So I can call that everything the same color, and it means nothing, literally, to the process, is that everything gets changed in the zoning and the business license bylaw. So to the point we're bringing this up, it's not that the village is trying to be evasive. It is literally, we're at a point where we're at that part of the discussion, we're not there yet.
Okay, so do you need to change the OCP in order to change zoning?
So everything that is no, so the zoning is non-binding, or the OCP is non-binding.
I know, but do you need to change the OCP in order to change bylaws or change zoning?
No.
But we also have to update it every 5 years. We are,
I know.
yeah, I'm just mentioning that part of the law. This is,
Can I explain, sure? So throw away that map, that last. That you're
Yeah.
thinking of? Throw that
No,
So right now, until we redo, until we get into the zoning, everything is the same. Well, not technically, because we're following our last zoning. But in this map, residential is residential. There's no difference in it whatsoever, whether it's orange or yellow.
but if the OCP doesn't change or dictate zones or bylaws, why are we changing the land use designation?
our zoning has to,
So I guess, which change are you talking about
I'm
specifically?
talking about the yellow, where you're talking about multi-use and apartment buildings, higher density.
So those questions come in the zoning. Those are the meetings.
I know, but if you don't change this to multi-use, you can't propose a zone to have.
So the multi-use was in the current OCP. That link was the same. So that has not changed at all. So we'll get around that right now, is that there's no change to, the only thing that has changed as far as our mapping and our designations for this OCP versus the last one is we've combined the low density and medium density property into one, and now it's residential neighborhood. Anything that is yellow, that literally has not changed in iota from
So
the last one. So
when we go through the zoning, that's what determines what you'll be able to do in different parts, right? Right now, we just follow the last zoning. Don't follow
And I know,
the other.
because when we were at the community center, there was this,
Yeah,
the semantics again of
exactly.
land use and zoning. So I feel like we're doing that a bit again. So what is changing? Low density to medium density? That's what's changed?
it's combined,
So that is a change
Yeah.
in that yellow area.
not in yellow, in orange.
You
The
know,
orange used to be two different colors. It used to be a lighter yellow, and then it used to be a different, I can't remember even what the color, but those were combined. Nothing, literally nothing south of the creek has been changed. If you're south of Erie Creek, that nothing has changed from the old OCP to this one, except literally the color on the map. And it went from the one with the X's, the color with the X's, to now just a solid color.
Sure, if I may, can I just ask, like, I want to understand your concerns with this.
I guess I'm confused is why do we post maps and why are we referring to maps if there's been no changes? And why are we talking about medium density? Why are we talking about secondary dwellings and apartment buildings? Like, why are we talking about all of that if it hasn't changed?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, provincial legislation has changed significantly since the last OCP, that basically the province's forced municipalities has to increase density. The only thing is that, so we've done that in the OCP, we haven't done that in the zoning because the last conversations stopped after the first reading or the public hearing a couple of years ago. Ultimately, that zoning bylaw, if it was passed, was going to reflect some of the provincial government changes. It had other changes in it, of course, but this is part of the issue, is because legislation has changed, we're now under like a great example is like if somebody wants to develop a basement suite and they have a basement now, we can't stop it. As far as, hey, we don't think we want that there, the parking's too tight, whatever reason, we don't have a say. Is the province dictated that. So the problem is that with our zoning bylaw and our OCP, they both need to catch up. So part of the combining the low and the medium reflects that ability for us as staff to, when somebody applies for a basement suite or a carriage house, it makes it an easier process, because right now, if somebody wants to do it, they have to come to council and spend $1,000 on a residential variance permit. Then they have to spend another $1,500 on an OCP permit to change that, just to put in a garage package or something in their backyard. So we have to update all of that to make that so that that's not possible, because if the people that want that construction to happen, they're just stopping. They're like, well, we're not paying you guys $2,500 to change colors on a map. So that's where that side of it is coming, as far as the combining of the density, was to allow for that secondary suite easier through the zoning to approve it.
But that is a change that's been made.
Yeah.
It's not that this is exactly the same as was just stated, like there
No.
have been changes.
I said that everything south of the river has stayed the same. Everything north of the creek, that's what's changed. So,
So south being the yellow,
yeah, none of that is any different. It's,
so that's already.
And the orange.
I'm sorry, let me retract that. Anything that is orange has changed. So the cottonwood and those ones, those have changed. Those were like, single family, like density. Those ones have changed, but anything in the yellow has not changed.
So that's not yet medium density. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. But if that's the proposal.
The proposal is what you see right there. The proposal as of right now is that nothing that's in the yellow is changing from the last one. That's where we're at.
And all the maps that were up on the walls are mandated and they're in our last OCP. We must have those. There's not something that we just miraculously brought to that public. They were at the
I
last
think-
OCP.
And we need those in
I
it.
know, I
Exactly.
think there was also a discussion that some of the maps were wrong and why is this here, where is that? Like, I'm just trying to understand.
If I wanted
It's
to replace this, everybody who was bringing it up in the public hearing about that was wrong, flat out. These are the maps, this is the draft. Anything else that people were referencing, the only map that would matter is the old OCP map and saying that this is what we're changing it. And all that would have changed is that the bottom where the yellow is would have went from the X colors just to the bright yellow. And then the other only difference is that the low and the medium, which were yellow and, again, I can't remember the colors.
Two different colors.
Two different colors of orange, they're now combined into one. But that is literally it. Like the commercial cores stayed the same. I've changed the colors for the park versus institutional.
Yeah.
But for actual property uses, the only ones that have been affected are the orange.
Okay. And so with this, there's a lot of talk and a lot of people are hung up, like you said at the very beginning, understanding terminology and stuff. So there's a lot of talk about the density and developing and all of that. And you made a comment about, you felt like a lot of the comments made were anti-development, which perhaps it appears that way, but I don't think anybody's opposed to increasing services and offerings in Salmo, and housing is a huge issue. But we talk a lot about the housing, and when do we talk about the downtown core and business development, economic development? Like, where is that piece in the conversation? When does that happen?
I guess it's in here. I guess specifically, what are you talking about addressing?
Just like in the survey, people were talking about like our main street and empty buildings, buildings that are kind of left to rot, their room to grow and develop, like having the conversation we had again at the community center is moving businesses out of the downtown core into the residential rather than focusing on having them like in our core, like.
That's why the last one got voted down.
Mhm.
So I would doubt that it's gonna get to that point in this meeting. And the way that Derek's doing it is different too,
Mhm.
and rating the businesses to where they would be inconvenient and stuff. So he's got a totally different way of putting things together.
Mhm. But like, you're right, when you said like we all got really hung up on this thing and then these other things didn't get talked about. So does that mean we've missed that chance or they come at a different time?
Well, we're going to have another public hearing. I guess this is where, when we have these public hearings, the people will bring up whatever they want to bring up. And if they bring up one thing, well, from our perspective, well, that is the primary community concern. And it's not that there are others, but we have these opportunities, with the survey and everything else to provide feedback. But for us, it it's a matter of, we're looking at this, like what's in our draft right now, OCP, we're looking at. It's not so much that we're trying to force properties or businesses out of downtown.
No, I'm,
Yeah.
You're gonna cut it off because we're 1 minute and we have Cheryl. Do you have any questions?
I do, but I don't know if I can.
Well,
fit them in.
why do it?
It's, okay, I missed the lab community meeting. I would have watched it if it was recorded or available on. So forgive me if I'm asking questions that are repetitive, though I have tried outsourcing to community and haven't gotten any clear answers. And I'm going to kind of like rapid fire here, and then you can answer them in a grouping as you wish. Is the concession upgrade a guarantee? What framework is there for interested community groups to be included with the QP Park concession planning and approval? Who has input? How to book use? How can we use the space and financial resources allocated to support that for the broadest community benefit? Like I've personally used that park with the farmers market, the Arts Council, SVYCC, softball, and private rentals for event hosting, all of which could benefit from having a usable concession there.
You're gonna have to just stop, yes, or just go on.
Motion to extend the meeting. I'm sorry.
How long?
Go 20 minutes.
15? 20? You wanna do 20?
Yeah.
Can the physical plans include storage to support ongoing?
Just that, I need a second, I need,
I'll send it.
thank you.
Sorry.
All in favor?
In
Thank you.
Can the physical plans for the concession upgrades include storage for support for ongoing events in the park, like markets, concerts, Canada Day, which would reduce limited staff and volunteer capacity? For example, if the Arts Council could buy tables and the farmers market could use the tables, but they were stored there, which would drastically reduce physical
Okay,
labor.
you have a lot in that question. There's no ways the CAO is gonna be able to remember all of that.
No, I
Just a bit.
could answer it very simply.
Yeah.
As we're not there yet.
Okay.
And
And
all that's up for discussion.
how do we get included in that conversation?
Part of this is with the Parks Master Plan, but I mean, ultimately, right now, all that we have in the budget is for the planning and the design of it. So when we get to the point of discussing the Parks Master Plan and if the concession is a part of that future, what it would look like, and then there's, ample opportunity for public input. We're gonna be reaching out to the community groups and to the community itself for this, to talk about it specifically, because I think that it is an issue that the community cares about. And it's just trying to figure out the balance of everything. So, we'll wait and see. Short answer.
And that, sorry, can I? Yeah, that's totally what we wanted to kind of have that conversation going, because as people mentioned, like putting tax dollars into something that's used for one day is absolutely not what any of us want to do. So that conversation about like what could service the community, is it a commercial kitchen that people can rent? Is it storage spaces or meeting rooms? So there's going to be lots more discussion on that. If there is a concession building that's built, it needs to be serve our whole community.
Good. And I would love to see meetings have a little bit more public notice. Like the last community meeting, which was on the 9th, was announced pretty short ahead of time, and there was no options for remote participation.
When we have it at the gym, there is no options, because that's where we have it, at the youth center.
Yeah,
The gym.
but having more public notice would be great. Like, I feel like that was under maybe for that one.
Can I ask you how long? Because I think it was out for 2 weeks.
Legally, we followed legal requirements.
I think it was
So
out for 2
anything
weeks.
else would have been.
Because-
Yeah.
Because our charter dictates how long we have to advertise the public hearing. So when you say more, like how much more?
2 weeks is great. I did not see it online.
And
2
Because
weeks
that's
ahead of time at all, and I frequent the village website, the village Facebook, and the Salmo area communicator more than average, and I definitely didn't see anything posted on like signboards at the post office or anything like that. And I know, as someone who hosts events in our community. It's not good enough just to put it on the community. Like it has to be, but Facebook, like it can't just be on Meta. There has to be something on a physical bulletin board outside the post office.
So we do.
Yeah.
And it was, like, again, we
Yeah.
legally required it's 7 days. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's,
so for us, it's always website,
Yeah.
Facebook, this bulletin board, that bulletin board.
yeah,
That's,
I try and stay on top of the meeting notices and that one took me by surprise.
yeah. Anywhere else we don't advertise openly, as far as like, we're looking at
It's a
maybe,
free for all.
maybe public hearing, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No,
If I may through
There's
the
no
chair.
control.
We do have a budget for communication, so it's something that I've talked to CEO about myself, is getting it out. If we can do radio ads, whatever, we do have budgeted monies for it, so we can, I think we can do better.
Yeah.
Because I think with a lot more communication, we'll get a lot more feedback.
Yeah.
And then we'll have less upset citizens that want to hang us in the truth. So, yes, I do agree. I think communication is key with the public, and I think we can do better, but we do our legal requirement. I can guarantee you that.
And so the parks planning, there'll be announcements in the coming weeks about how to stay involved with that.
yeah, well, like, as we're progressing through our zoning and our OCP, we're going to go and, working through the park plan, and
Yeah.
then like that'll end up on council agendas and all of that. Part of it, we're still at a determination about public hearings and all of that, how we're gonna roll that out when. Because our timelines have changed originally from when we were planning on doing it. It's just shifted a month or two, so,
Yeah.
we have to kind of just talk about that.
I just found it on our Facebook page, February 26th. So it would have went out, as soon as they put it on there, they print off on a green
Yeah,
piece
well,
of paper
that's
and it goes there
11
and then.
days.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying that we can't improve on it.
Yeah.
Like, for the record, is that I would be the first to say that knowing that was one of the biggest comments that we got was we need better communication. Absolutely.
Just putting it out there is like the bare minimum. If people's like, if their algorithms are not tied into looking at it, it just doesn't appear.
Yeah.
And doing the bare minimum is like pretty piss poor, to be honest, as local government. I've worked in community engagement in local government before. Like, it would be really great to see a little bit more like active
How
kind of.
we put it at both.
This is the rub, is that
Not newspaper
for
anymore.
these things, it's really.
But doing like, you can, there's a possibility for it.
And like statistically, the Arts Council gets more engagement via Instagram than Facebook.
I know,
That's,
we've talked about that.
Yeah,
The
it'd be more of
The
a,
younger generation is using Instagram
Yeah,
more than
and-
Facebook.
yeah. And then my other 3 very long questions can be held for the park specific, since we're at 10 after 10.
I could recommend, if you do want to send them through email.
Yeah.
You can see the CAO, mayor and council, and
Yeah,
you can do that.
and my like last point, which is parks related, is I think that the community at large would love if the village would put out some sort of declaration regarding the pest control in KP parks that just addresses if we are using poisoning, how that isn't going to spread to
Yeah.
wild birds, wildlife, pets.
Yeah.
That just as,
No, absolutely, we had talked about that, there was, thankfully, we didn't end up going through with it.
yeah,
But it's gonna be booked again, come, closer to Easter.
yeah, I think
And that'll be a lot better.
there'll be hysteria about it if
Yes.
there isn't direct communication.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys all.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for putting this. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you for your input. Thank you for your questions and I'm not gonna thank you for your patience because we all have to sit there.
you can get paid for it. Cincinnati. That's so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Okay.
Motion to adjourn. I will second your motion.
There you go.
Thank you, observer.
In favor?